Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly through a carved wooden door that doesn't creak. Not because it's silent by design, but because someone oils the hinges each morning before sunrise. You're in the Imperial heart of the Ottoman Empire now, and this isn't a place where outsiders linger. Candlelight flickers along golden walls and rose water clings to the air like a second skin. Beneath your feet, carpets thicken your steps, swallowing any trace of your presence. You're about to enter the world of the harem, where perfumed intrigue, silk-draped alliances, and whispered schemes twist like ivy around the pillars of power. And no, you probably won't survive this. Not unless you master how to speak in glances, survive on secrets, and make allies out of women who know 50 ways to smile without meaning it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing our sleepy little history circle stretch across time zones. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You inhale deeply as you enter. The scent is layered damask roses, amber resin cloves drifting in from some unseen brazier. Your eyes need a moment to adjust. The lighting is soft, not by accident, but by careful design. No harsh corners here. Everything has been softened, walls painted with tulips and full-bloom windows, latticed to hide and reveal in equal measure. This is the harem, not the wild fantasies painted by 19th century Orientalist artists with too much imagination and too little access. No feathered headdresses, no belly dancers twirling for foreign eyes. Here you find an empire of women living just beyond the boundary of visibility, where every gesture means more than it seems. The first thing you notice is the quiet. It isn't silence, really. There's the hush of feet on velvet carpets, the subtle clink of a silver tray. The distant trill of a reed flute, notes so fragile you wonder if you imagined them. You're not alone. Eyes study you not unkindly, but curiously. Eunuchs in black silk stand like shadows against the columns, expressionless and vigilant. They are the gatekeepers of this hidden world, their loyalty sworn not to the Sultan alone, but to the women under his roof. Tall doors are opened for you with hands that reveal no emotion, only precision. Someone passes you holding a brass censer, and as it sways, it releases puffs of sandalwood smoke that tangle in the air like questions left unanswered. A concubine glides by, her gaze avoiding yours, though you feel the brush of her presence like a breeze trailing scented fabric. Everything here glows not with fire, but with polish. The walls shimmer with mother-of-pearl inlays. Cushions are stuffed with goose down and covered in textiles finer than most thrones outside this palace. You spot a bowl of fresh apricots stacked beside candied rose petals and a silver dish holding sugar-dusted dates. Every item is arranged just so as though the placement of fruit were a chess move with consequences. Historians still argue whether the harem was a prison or a sanctuary. Was it a space of suppression or of subtle sovereignty? You can already feel both truths pulsing through the floor beneath your feet, and then you hear it a whisper. Not words exactly, more the sound of breath shared in passing. Laughter, soft and fleeting, rides the current like a firefly before disappearing behind a silk curtain. You don't know the joke, but you know it had meaning. Here, meaning is the real currency. Beauty helps, of course, but charm, cleverness, those will keep you breathing. One mainstream account suggests that the harem in Topkapi Palace, this very space, once housed over 300 women from concubines to the Valid Sultan herself. But records are slippery and names even more so. Most of the women here are known only by titles not their birth names. You are surrounded by ghosts who wore silk and spoke 6 languages but left behind no graves with markers. And yet there's a liveliness here you hadn't expected. Someone somewhere is singing in Persian, and the cadence floats down like embroidered silk from a balcony. You turn a corner and see a courtyard glowing with lanterns, golden fish flickering in the pool beneath a carved fountain, shaped like a tulip bursting open. The courtyard is empty, but the cushions are warm. A few steps further, you notice a small mosaic in the corner of the floor. Tiny cobalt tiles arranged in the shape of a phoenix, a playful detail, or a message from the artisan buried under centuries of imperial footwear. A fringe tidbit. One concubine is said to have trained a nightingale to mimic her name. The bird would perch outside the Sultan's window, singing until he summoned her. No one ever proved it, but the story clings to these corridors like perfume clings to fabric. And now, you're deep inside. The walls seem closer, the air heavier. You're being watched not with suspicion, but with curiosity, as if you're a character in someone else's dream. Maybe you are, because in the harem, even reality wears a veil. You step through an arch where light diffuses like cream into coffee, and for a breathless moment the world feels suspended. The corridor narrows, funneling you towards something sacred or dangerous, which here is often the same thing. At the end of this passage stands the Gate of Felicity, and no, that's not poetic exaggeration. That's its actual name. A gilded gate guarded by silenced tradition and men who would rather die than let you pass uninvited. It marks the boundary between the public world and the private realm of the Sultan, the inner sanctum where love becomes leverage, and silence is its own language. You shouldn't be here. But let's assume for tonight only you've been granted an impossible privilege. Perhaps you're invisible. Perhaps you're a shadow. You glance at the massive wooden doors inlaid with mother of pearl and edged in gold leaf, and you realize they aren't just meant to close. They're meant to separate. On the other side lies the harem proper, where the Sultan's consorts reside, ruled not by the Sultan himself, but by an older, subtler figure, the Valid Sultan. But more on her later. 2 eunuchs stand to the side dressed in robes so dark they seem to drink the candlelight. They don't move, but you can feel their awareness like a hand against your spine. They're the black eunuchs chosen for their absolute loyalty trained. Since youth entrusted with duties that would make most men flinch. Historians still debate the exact origin of these guardians. Some argue they came from Nubia. Others claim Ethiopia. They were captured or purchased, castrated, then trained for imperial service. But they didn't just guard doors, they guarded power. And their rise through the palace hierarchy was as strategic as any concubines. You try not to stare. Their faces are unreadable. Carved almost, but not cruel, just distant. As if they've seen 1,000 people walk this path and forget themselves by the end of it. One of them, taller, his fingers laced in front of him like a statue brought to life, nods almost imperceptibly. The doors creak open just enough for you to pass. Beyond them, everything is different. The light is gentler, the noise thinner. You are now inside the threshold of the Ottoman elite's most private dimension. You have crossed into a space where time is measured not by clocks, but by perfume bathwater and silken rustle. A fringe fact. It was said that eunuchs knew every woman's schedule by scent alone, who bathed in orange blossom, who used jasmine oil, who preferred cloves. Whether that's true or just a delicious bit of myth, let's call it likely adjacent to the truth. You move past the vestibule and the architecture begins to tilt toward the surreal. Ceilings rise overhead into tiled domes painted in turquoise and lapis patterns that swirl like stars trapped in stone. The geometry is maddeningly perfect. Ottoman architects weren't just engineers, they were mathematicians whispering their secrets in ceramics. The air cools slightly as you descend a short staircase. You think about how every inch of this place was crafted for psychological impact. The narrowing corridor, the sudden silence, the change in temperature, it's all meant to prepare you to feel small, to make you receptive, to make you cautious. Welcome to Palace Theater. You hear a sudden flutter. Doves, dozens of them, roost in a cloister above. Their feathers snow lightly onto the marble floor, drifting like misplaced wishes. Here's where it gets strange. One hallway leads to a prayer chamber, another to the baths. One leads to a garden, and yet they all seem identical. Same arches, same tapestries, same soft shadows. This place is designed to disorient, to keep outsiders from ever feeling truly in. You imagine a concubine walking here in embroidered slippers, every step rehearsed, every turn memorized. If she gets lost, that's not just an inconvenience, it could be a political error. In one niche, you spot an object that seems out of place, a wooden box no larger than a loaf of bread. When you peek inside, you see bundles of dried rose petals, stitched sachets of musk, and a single curved blade gold-hilted and ornamental. Was it a gift? A relic or just a warning? You wonder absurdly if anyone here has ever laughed out loud. And then, as if summoned by the thought, you hear it, a child's giggle. It echoes from somewhere above, trailing along the stone like a silk ribbon. You glance up, but the corridor's curves hide whoever made it. Perhaps one of the Sultan's children playing with a tutor. Or perhaps a ghost. This place is thick with both. You stop before another door, this one smaller. Painted red with a tulip motif carved into the lintel. The tulip, you may recall, was a sacred obsession for the Ottomans. At one point, they paid more for a single rare bulb than a soldier's yearly wage. Economists still shake their heads over that one. Through the door, you glimpse a set of rooms decorated not with gold, but restraint. A scholar's space, tiled shelves, calligraphy framed in wood. It's a reminder not all power here wore perfume. Some wielded ink. You pause. Behind you, the gate of felicity is still visible, half open now, as if unsure whether to invite you in or shut you out. You realize this isn't just a door, it's a choice. Once you cross fully, you no longer belong to the rhythm of the outside world. You belong to the rhythm of veils, of glances, of whispered names and forgotten songs. One breath, one step, and you're in. You walk with careful steps now, not because you're afraid, but because the air itself insists on reverence. Even the walls seem to listen in this part of the palace. You've entered a new corridor, but it doesn't unfold, it coils. And before you realize it, you're being led not by a person, but by architecture itself. Up ahead, two tall doors stand slightly ajar. Beyond them lies one of the most peculiar paradoxes of Ottoman design power, hidden in softness. You step inside. This is the court of the black eunuchs, the men who manage the inner workings of the harem. It's not what you expected. The room is vast but hushed, lined with scrolls, ledger books, and incense burners quietly exhaling sandalwood into the shadows. In one corner, a clerk copies names onto parchment, concubines, their daily needs, their preferred perfumes, their medical records. Yes, even preferences were power here. You're still trying to reconcile what you see. These eunuchs are not simply guards. They're administrators, diplomats, and sometimes confessors. They knew who bathed where, who fainted last week, and who cried alone on her cushion at dawn. They're part servant, part spy, part historian. A mainstream fact. The chief black eunuch, known as the Kızlar Ayası, was one of the most powerful figures in the empire. He had direct access to the Sultan-managed harem security, and even handled correspondence with foreign dignitaries. At one point, he wielded more influence than most viziers. Historians still argue whether this power was earned through loyalty or simply tolerated because it served the Sultan's need for absolute control. Was the Kızlar Ayası a mere instrument of the Sultan's will, or something more? You move deeper into the room, passing beneath hanging lanterns that shimmer like captured stars. On a nearby cushion, a black-robed eunuch rests with his eyes closed, not asleep, just suspended. He's listening even in stillness. You realize there's a kind of peace in this power. These men stripped of lineage possess no dynastic threat. They are both everywhere and invisible. Trust without risk. A younger eunuch walks by balancing a tray of lemon water and cinnamon cakes. His steps are silent, his expression impassive. But you notice a flicker of emotion as he glances toward a curtained doorway, a fleeting look that suggests even in this world of obedience, longings still bloom. In the corner of the room is a curious object, a small mirror mounted at waist height, surrounded by blue Iznik tiles. It's positioned not for vanity, but vigilance. The reflection shows the doorway behind you. These men live by reflection of actions of intentions of rooms behind rooms. One fringe detail. It's said that during particularly tense political moments, the chief eunuch would hide letters inside the hems of his robe, carried so carefully that not even the valid sultan would suspect. Whether this was espionage or simple discretion, who can say that Robe walked a tightrope through whispers and rumors and probably hid more than parchment? A creaking floorboard draws your attention. Behind a wooden lattice, you glimpse a narrow stairway leading upward, possibly to the women's quarters. But you don't climb. Not yet. For now you stand at the threshold of bureaucracy veiled in incense. The eunuchs here aren't just guardians of women. They're keepers of narrative. They control access, timing, memory. They know which concubine danced with peacock feathers in 1573 who collapsed from heat stroke during a tulip festival in 1601 and who quietly without drama never returned from a bath one spring morning. You feel it now more than before. This place isn't governed by fire and sword. It's ruled by silence and structure. And the men who run it don't need loud voices, they just need excellent memory. As you turn to leave the chamber, one of the eunuchs finally speaks. Just one sentence. She was crying again this morning. You don't know who she is, but you understand. There's a hallway to your left now, narrower than the rest. The tiles are cracked in places and a cool draft plays at your ankles. It leads to the kitchens, perhaps, or to the baths. But more importantly, it leads away from oversight towards something less formal. You follow. A soft murmur grows louder. Not conversation. Chanting, no singing. A voice without accompaniment. The words are in Ottoman Turkish, lyrical and slow. You can't understand them, but you feel them. Like a lullaby once heard in another life. You stop at a small arched doorway. Carved above it is a tulip again. They're everywhere, etched into tiles, embroidered into robes, burned into furniture. The Ottomans loved them not just for beauty, but for metaphor. The tulip in Ottoman calligraphy closely resembles the Arabic word for Allah. A flower becomes a prayer. You press your palm to the stone wall, cool and unmoving. But this place is alive. It hums. not loudly but deeply. Every wall here has absorbed centuries of secrets. Some whispered into cushions, others screamed into silence. And just as you're about to turn, a final detail catches your eye: a pair of slippers left neatly by a mat. Small, embroidered, well-worn. Someone was here recently. Someone will be back. You step forward into the silence once more. And this time the corridor does not resist. The walls begin to glow in soft pastels as you follow the curling corridor. Light pours in through high windows, carved with delicate filigree casting dappled shapes across your path. Geometries of light and shadow that shift like memory. You've arrived in the inner courts of the women's quarters now. The velvet hush here feels heavier, like a secret that's gotten used to not being spoken. The first thing you notice is the scent. Not the bold wave of rosewater you smelled before, but something more complex, like amber clove, orange blossom, and the faintest trace of cardamom tucked beneath the rest like a shy thought. A concubine must have passed through minutes ago. Maybe she's still here. This is where the consorts live, the Sultan's favorites, hopefuls, and all those balancing delicately between favor and forgetting. Their rooms form a honeycomb around open courtyards where birds sing and fountains gurgle as if they've never heard of dynastic politics. You pass a lattice window, and behind it a soft voice hums a melody you don't recognize. The words are not important. The mood is. You take in the details: polished marble underfoot low tables, inlaid with mother of pearl, and cushions so plentiful they resemble cloud banks. Tucked into every alcove are mirrors, not just for vanity, but for theater. A turn of the face, a flash of a smile, an artful sigh seen in reflection performance is everywhere. Then from behind a silk-draped partition, a woman steps forward. She moves like smoke, graceful but cautious. Her robes shimmer in plum and gold. She holds a small silver hand mirror, the kind meant to catch more than just one's face. You lock eyes briefly, and she smiles the kind of smile that doesn't touch her eyes. You've just met a consort, one of the favored. She doesn't speak, but she doesn't have to. She gestures, then sits by a mosaic fountain carved into the wall. You follow. She places the mirror down between you, angle tilted, so that both your faces share the frame. An invitation. The mirror, you realize, is not for grooming. It's for staging. In this world, your reflection is your reputation. And hers, flawless. A mainstream fact. The harem was more than a place of seclusion, it was a political school. Consorts were trained in etiquette, poetry, calligraphy, languages, and music. Those who rose in rank often wielded considerable political influence through their sons or through relationships with court officials. Being beautiful helped, but being clever mattered more. She picks up a tiny vial of kohl and begins to apply it with slow, steady precision. Not once does she break eye contact with the mirror. Every flick of her wrist is deliberate. When she finally looks away, it's not toward you, but toward her own reflection. Then she speaks. "Did you know?" She murmurs, voice like honey laced with salt. "The mirrors here remember everything you don't say." You blink, unsure if it's a joke or something closer to prophecy. She sets down the kohl and picks up a fan, ivory ribbed silk, stretched like a curtain across its delicate frame. With a single flick, she opens it. Flick, half closed. Flick, twirl. It's not a nervous habit, it's code. In fact, it was rumored that harem women developed an entire silent language using fans. 1 flick for disapproval, 2 for flirtation, a sharp snap, shut danger. Historians still debate whether this fan language was real or romantic fiction, layered atop an already mythic world. But here in this moment, it feels entirely plausible. You sit in quiet companionship for a while. She adjusts a single gold pin in her hair, then glances at the mirror again. Her expression is unchanged, yet you feel something has shifted. Maybe it's you. You're about to speak when a low chime rings from somewhere above. Not loud, but decisive. She straightens instantly. The Sultan is awake. Or he's moving. Or he's simply changed his mind, which here amounts to the same thing. She stands the mirror forgotten and glides through a beaded curtain that hushes its own parting. You watch her go, feeling like a candle that's just been snuffed out, not extinguished, but suddenly less necessary. Left alone, you stare into the mirror. For a moment, you think you see her again. But it's just your own face reflected with more uncertainty than before. You move toward the edge of the room, passing another alcove where two women are braiding each other's hair. They speak softly in a blend of Turkish and Persian laughter stitched gently between their words. Their hands move quickly, trained by repetition and rivalry, a fringe detail. One concubine once earned the Sultan's affection, simply because her braids resembled the architecture of the Blue Mosque's minarets. Was it intentional? Probably. Charm is often geometry dressed in perfume. As you step out into the courtyard, the sun has shifted. The shadows now stretch longer, like they're trying to overhear what's been said. The women vanish one by one, summoned, dismissed, absorbed back into the honeycomb. You linger for a moment longer, watching as a breeze picks up petals from a shallow bowl of water. One floats toward you, you catch it. Jasmine. It smells like her. You follow the curling hallway as it dips gently into a quieter wing, where the scent shifts from jasmine to something steamier, citrus, eucalyptus, and the faintest trace of clove oil. The walls grow warmer to the touch, and you soon realize why. You're approaching the hammam, the bathhouse, one of the most ritualized and revealing spaces in the harem. Before you even enter, a fine mist greets you, curling out from beneath the stone archway like a breath held too long. The room beyond glows amber, not from sunlight, but from polished brass lanterns that reflect off every wet surface. A concubine passes by with a copper pitcher, balanced expertly on her shoulder, the steam hugging her figure like a second robe. The bathhouse is a place of cleansing, but not just of the body. In the harem, the hammam is where social grooming unfolds with almost surgical precision. Friendships are forged alliances, tested enemies observed through curls of citrus-laced vapor. A mainstream fact, Ottoman imams weren't just for relaxation. They were vital for hygiene, ritual purification, and even matchmaking. The Sultan's mother often observed new concubines here, deciding which ones might catch his eye, not by their beauty alone, but by how they carried themselves in vulnerability. You step carefully across the warm marble tiles, your footprints disappearing behind you. The room is round with a central octagonal slab called the Gobek Tasha, or belly stone heated from beneath. Women lie draped across it, their skin glowing with sweat and oil, murmuring softly between splashes of water. The acoustics here are strange. One voice becomes many. Laughter blooms, then vanishes in the echo. You hear snippets of conversation. Someone's brother sent a poem from Damascus. Another lost a ring down a drain and swore it was cursed anyway. Near the edge, a young concubine dips a cloth into a golden basin. Her eyes catch yours for just a moment. She doesn't flinch, but she does look away quickly. You get the sense she's new, too cautious with her hands, too fast in rinsing her hair. She's still learning that everything here is performance, even the way you sponge your shoulders. A plump older woman, clearly a veteran, offers her a piece of candied orange peel and gestures for her to slow down. "No one sees you here," she says, "unless you want to be seen." That's not true, of course. Someone always sees, but it's a kindness, and the girl nods. A fringe tidbit. In some Ottoman bathhouses, it was common for bath attendants to communicate via tiny silver bells tied to their wrists or ankles. Each chime meant, "Something pour water, bring soap, leave me alone." The bells were later banned in the palace baths for revealing too much about who was meeting whom. The steam thickens as you move toward a side alcove where two women sit close their hands, submerged in a bowl of milk and rose petals. They speak in low tones, the kind reserved for topics too precious or too dangerous to say aloud elsewhere. One nods toward the Valid Sultan's quarters. The other raises an eyebrow. They're plotting something, or at least pretending to. In this place, gossip is currency, and even fake schemes can buy you real attention. Historians still argue whether the bathhouse was a neutral zone or a stage of its own. Some claim no business was done here, only rest. Others insist that entire successions were shaped while water lapped at marble. The truth, as usual, is likely both. As you linger near the tiled wall, you run your fingers across its cool, moist surface. Tiny blue tulips curl around each other in a repeating pattern that suggests eternity. You wonder how many women before you trace this same line while thinking of escape love or revenge. A burst of laughter rings out suddenly, pure, unguarded. One of the older concubines has recited a risque riddle about figs and falcons. Everyone pretends to be scandalized. No one actually is. Then a bell chimes. Not the forbidden silver kind, a deeper melodic tone echoing through the chamber. Time to leave. Women rise like silk, lifting in slow wind. Robes are wrapped, hair bound in towels, expressions reset. Whatever was shared here, fears, flirtations, even secrets, vanishes with the steam. It rises, hits the dome overhead, and vanishes into the circular sky hole that lets in only light, never truth. You step outside, skin damp and scented with spices you can't name. The air feels different now, cooler, more solid. But you're not quite ready to return to politics and protocols. You're still humming with the intimate chaos of the bathhouse, its warmth, its glances, its wordless treaties formed in mist. Behind you, a concubine drops a towel, and for just a moment her back is visible, curved like a crescent moon, adorned with a single line of script inked near her spine. You don't read Ottoman, but you know what it says. It says, "I remember everything." You drift along the corridor like a scent caught in silk, half there, half not. Your thoughts still fogged from the hammam's warmth. But the mood is shifting again. The air has cooled, sharpened. The marble tiles gleam beneath your feet like they've been recently polished, and maybe they have. Every corner here has been touched by hands you'll never see. And now you notice something new fans. Not ceiling fans, mind you, but hand fans. Dozens of them. Painted, carved, embroidered, edged in gold silk, even slivers of ivory. They flutter like butterflies in discreet conversations, whispering secrets no ears can hear. You've wandered into the Hall of Fans, and yes, that's not an official name. It's just what the women call it when no one is listening. The fan you're starting to understand is not just for modesty or comfort, it's a weapon. A shield. A tongue without sound. The concubines here communicate in glances, in finger flicks, in the sudden snap of a fan, closed too sharply to be innocent. Historians still argue whether this elaborate language of fans was real or just a later romantic fabrication. But when you watch two women exchange 4 gestures and then walk away without a word, it's hard not to believe. You pass 2 girls on a divan, both no older than 16. One fans herself, lazily, eyes half-lidded in pretend boredom. The other giggles too loudly, the fan pressed to her cheek like a confession. They are not idle. They are practicing. These are their rehearsals long before they ever share a cushion with the Sultan. A mainstream fact. The training of a concubine in the Ottoman Harem was rigorous. Girls were taught calligraphy, dance, embroidery, music, court etiquette, and how to memorize poetry in at least 2 languages. It wasn't just about beauty, it was about polish. A gleaming surface, yes, but also a sharpened edge. A tall woman in deep emerald robes enters the room. The others hush without being told. Her fan doesn't move, but her eyes do a slow sweep that makes 3 concubines lower their gaze and 1 fidget in her seat. You don't know her name, but her authority is clear. She's been here a while. Possibly decades. Possibly since before the current Sultan ascended. She walks past you without a sound. You get only the faintest trace of cinnamon and sandalwood, and the crisp snap of her fan shutting at the exact moment a girl tries to speak. A warning. A command you'll never know. But the girl blushes, stands as leaves. A fringe tidbit. Some fans were rumored to be laced with powdered herbs calming, intoxicating, or even sleep-inducing. A single flick beneath a rival's nose could change the outcome of an evening. No one ever proved it. No one really wanted to. You pause beside a table where fans are laid out like weapons in a miniature armory. One is lacquered red with a tiny crescent moon in mother of pearl at the tip. Another is made entirely of peacock feathers, impractical, dramatic, and somehow utterly perfect. You pick up one trimmed in gold thread. As you lift it, a folded piece of parchment flutters out. You hesitate, then unfold it. A poem written in delicate Persian script. Speak not with lips, for eyes betray. The fan shall flutter what you cannot say. Below the lines, a tiny seal, just a tulip pressed in wax. You fold the note and replace it beneath the fan. Someone will return for it. Or maybe they won't. That's the beauty of this place. Messages often go undelivered, yet still manage to change everything. At the far end of the hall, sunlight filters through colored glass and paints fractured rainbows across the walls. 2 women are seated there, half in shadow. One peels almonds. The other is telling a story. You edge closer, pretending to study a tapestry. She dropped the fan twice, the storyteller says. Twice. Right in front of the Sultan. And he laughed. Laughed like it was the most charming thing he'd ever seen. She did it on purpose, the other replies, popping an almond into her mouth. Obviously the first agrees. He sent her a velvet robe that night. Velvet robes. Fan drops. Almonds. This is the language of assent. You sit for a moment beside a potted citrus tree, the small green fruits perfuming the air with something tart and alive. A cat slips through the archway, utterly unbothered by human ambition. You almost envy her. Then the tall woman returns again without warning. This time she pauses near you. Her gaze doesn't land directly, but somewhere just to the side enough for you to feel seen without being acknowledged. She lifts her fan and fans herself once. Slowly, deliberately. Then she walks on. That gesture, it means I saw you. And now you know it too. You follow the path her fan left behind, even though it wasn't meant for you. That one gesture, a slow, deliberate flick, hangs in your mind like incense impossible to bottle. And yet it lingers. You now understand everything in this place is a message. Even the breeze seems to know something you don't. As you turn the corner, a breath of music brushes past your ear, plucked strings low and sorrowful, threaded with something delicate and almost shy. You step onto a shaded walkway lined with pomegranate trees, their flowers blazing crimson like tiny bursts of defiance. The music floats from an upper balcony, soft as memory but insistent as longing. You look up and see her. She's seated cross-legged on a cushion behind a carved wooden lattice, the kind that lets light in but keeps eyes out. The instrument in her lap is an odd, pear-shaped lute, warm brown and worn at the edges. She plucks at the strings, absent-mindedly, gaze unfocused, lost somewhere between memory and invention. A curl of hair slips free from her veil and she doesn't bother to fix it. You don't know her name. You never will. But you know this girl somehow. She's the one who dreams through music. A mainstream fact. The oud was one of the most beloved instruments in the Ottoman world. It was played not only for entertainment, but to evoke mood, inspire poetry, and accompany spiritual rituals. In the harem, music was both pastime and performance, an audition in sound. She glances down at the courtyard and spots you. Her fingers still for a heartbeat, then resume. This time slower, more deliberate. She's playing for you now. Or perhaps at you. Either way the notes change, they lean toward melancholy. Historians still argue whether harem women composed original music or simply memorized songs taught by court musicians. There's no written record of melodies from the women's quarters, but legends speak of songs so powerful they soften the Sultan's mood for weeks. One even halted a planned execution, or so the story goes. You sit on a low bench beneath her window. The marble is warm beneath you, the kind of warmth that feels like it's been waiting all day to greet someone. You close your eyes and let the music do what it came here to do. Transport. The melody climbs, gently stumbles at one note, whether by accident or design, and recovers like a secret kept too long. You picture her hands calloused, perhaps despite the silk. She's not just entertaining herself, she's practicing or remembering. A fringe tidbit. One concubine known only as Layla of Bursa reportedly sent love notes to a court poet by embedding messages into the rhythm of her oud performances. He deciphered her patterns and sent back verses sewn into the lining of her pillow. They were never caught. They were also never seen together. You open your eyes and the girl has disappeared, vanished behind the lattice like a sigh slipping back into lungs. In her place, a small silk pouch dangles from a hook in the wood. It wasn't there before. You rise, approach, and untie it. Inside a folded parchment faintly scented with orange blossom. You hesitate, then open it. A poem scribbled hastily in Ottoman Turkish and French. If you hear me remember, this song is not for power. It is for the evening hour when the fig splits quietly. There's no name, no seal. Just that odd last line. You read it twice. Then again. You don't understand it fully, but you feel it. Like all things in the harem, it's coded, layered, never direct. You tuck the note back into the pouch and hang it where you found it. A breeze lifts through the courtyard, sending fallen pomegranate petals across the floor like shy dancers late to rehearsal. Above, the music resumes, but this time it's someone else playing. The notes are similar but sharper, less fluid. The girl has passed the oud to another. You move on, but not before casting one last glance at the lattice. It's just a screen of wood, but you're sure she's watching. You walk through the courtyard's far gate and find yourself beside a tiled fountain. Its basin filled with water so clear you can see the painted fish at the bottom. Ceramic unmoving, yet somehow alive. A eunuch stands nearby pretending to clean the edge with a cloth far too small for the task. He hums the melody you just heard. You pause. He hums the fig line twice. Then very quietly he says without looking at you, she only plays that when she wants someone to know she's still waiting for what you ask. He shrugs, wrings out the cloth, and walks away, leaving you with only the echo of a melody and the understanding that in this place every song is a message and every silence is an answer. The quiet lingers like dew as you pass under a silk-draped archway and into another chamber, this one humming with subtle movement. The air is thick with the scent of henna, earthy, bittersweet, the smell of transformation. You've stepped into one of the harem's private salons, a place where beauty is ritual, and ritual is strategy. The women here are gathered in loose circles, lounging on cushions, their laughter soft, but edged with calculation. Bowls of crushed herbs, oils, and pastes line low wooden tables. Every fingertip is stained, or soon will be. This is not just a spa day, it's a preparation. An offering. A spell. A young girl sits at the center, her hands cradled in the lap of an older woman who applies henna with slow, steady artistry. Spirals bloom across her palms, trailing toward her wrists like ivy growing in reverse. The older woman hums a lullaby under her breath, but her eyes are sharp. She's seen girls come and go, seen favorites rise overnight and vanish by morning. A mainstream fact, henna ceremonies in the harem weren't merely decorative. They were social events filled with symbolism, blessings, good luck, fertility, and occasionally warnings. A concubine about to meet the Sultan for the first time would often be painted from fingertips to elbows, not just to entice him, but to mark her as claimed, prepared, watched. You sit quietly beside a bowl of crushed pomegranate seeds and cloves, their scent spicy and oddly comforting. Two women beside you are discussing someone in low voices, their words slipping between Turkish and Persian like threads in a weave. She braided her hair too high again, one mutters. Desperate. She wore the honeyed perfume. So obvious. She smiled at the Valid Sultan. A pause. Brave. You don't know who they're speaking of, but the tone says everything. That girl is playing a dangerous game. One of them holds up her hand wet with fresh henna and begins to blow gently across the back of her palm. Her breath is careful, focused, like a spell being cast. A third woman paints a tiny tulip at the center of her hand, smaller than a coin, more delicate than a whisper. You see it again, that flower. Over and over, always watching. A fringe detail. Some concubines were said to write secret prayers into their henna designs, tiny Arabic letters woven into the pattern. Once dry, the ink faded, but the wish remained locked into the skin like a whisper. Only the body could remember. The older woman gestures to you, offering a bit of paste on a slim wooden stick. You extend your hand without speaking. She nods approvingly. Good. You understand? This is not the place for words. She paints a single swirl near your thumb, then dots the tip of your middle finger. When she finishes, she holds your hand for a moment, longer than necessary. Now you're part of the story, she says. You look around. The room glows with lamplight that flickers against copper bowls. Steam from nearby tea kettles rises in lazy tendrils. Someone sings quietly an old Anatolian melody about a woman who spoke with her hands when her mouth was sealed by fear. You shift slightly and notice a tray of honeyed almonds nestled beside a scroll of embroidered linen. One of the girls unwraps the cloth to reveal a small mirror and a folded letter. She reads it once, lips tight. Then she dabs her fingers into the honey, presses them to the paper, and burns the letter over the flame of a nearby lantern. The message is read, tasted, and destroyed. Historians still argue whether such letters were ever truly anonymous. The eunuchs watched everything. Still, the belief in secrecy persisted. Perhaps secrecy is less about hiding and more about preserving the illusion that you can. The henna begins to dry on your hand, tightening slightly with every passing minute. It's not uncomfortable, just a reminder that something invisible is now etched onto your skin. A mark that says, "You were here." The ceremony winds down. The older woman begins wrapping hands in gauze, binding the paste close to the skin, so the color will deepen overnight. One by one, the women rise, their faces unreadable again. The softness fades. The posturing returns. The beauty has been applied, but the real performance is still to come. You step outside into the corridor again, and the henna on your fingers flutters like a flag with each breath of wind. A eunuch stands nearby, his eyes following one girl who disappears down a corridor. He glances at your hand. "Be careful with that pattern," he says. "It looks a little too much like the Valley des Sultans." You open your mouth to reply, but he's already gone. And now you're left with a question you didn't know you'd asked. Whose pattern are you wearing? The corridors have narrowed again, not in structure, but in feeling. The air seems to close in, gently padded with secrets and the faint rustle of layered silk. You're moving uphill now in a quiet architectural climb that leads toward one of the most whispered-about chambers in the entire palace, the quarters of the Valid Sultan. It's easy to think of her as an old woman wrapped in shawls, perhaps sipping cardamom tea and petting a cat. And sure, sometimes she is that. But don't be fooled. The Valid Sultan is the axis of the harem, the eye of the hurricane, and her influence radiates in every direction. As you approach the arched doorway flanked by two eunuchs in burgundy sashes, you notice the subtle changes. The floors are warmer, the lamps are more elaborate. Even the silence here is expensive. You're ushered in by a nod, not a word, and find yourself in a sun-drenched room, scented faintly with lemon leaves and old paper. The Valley des Sultans sits beside a low table covered in pearl-inlaid boxes, letter scrolls and a single tulip resting in a glass of water that's been cut at an angle, evidence of deliberation even in floral arrangements. She doesn't look up. She's reading a letter, or pretending to. You wait, a mainstream fact. The Valide Sultan, literally Queen Mother, was one of the most powerful figures in the Ottoman Empire. She advised the Sultan-controlled appointments within the harem allocated stipends, and had final say over which concubines saw her son. In several cases, she influenced foreign policy, royal marriages, and even war strategy, all from behind a veil. Finally, she folds a letter and sets it aside with the quiet precision of someone who's ended more careers than she started. Then she speaks, her voice soft, but crackling with the weight of habit. "You're the one with the henna, aren't you?" Your hand twitches slightly, giving you away. She smiles, not warmly, not cruelly, just knowingly. "Ambition smells like clove oil," she murmurs. "And yours is very fragrant. You're not sure whether to thank her." She gestures to the cushions before her, and you sit legs folded, spine straight. Not because you're afraid, but because this is not a woman you slouch in front of. Her robe is modest by palace standards, no emeralds, no golden threads, but there's an elegance to its simplicity that screams earned power. She doesn't need jewelry. Her name is the Jewel. "I had that tulip pattern once," she says, nodding toward your hand, "many years ago. Before the Sultan had his beard, that could mean anything. It could be a joke. It could be a warning. A concubine enters quietly, offering tea in a delicate cup so thin, you're certain a harsh word would shatter it. The valide waves her off without glancing, her focus still on you. You've been in the bathhouse, she continues. Heard any good lies, you hesitate. Only beautiful ones. She chuckles genuinely. Those are my favorite kind. Then, unexpectedly, she sighs. There was a girl once, she says. She sang through the lattice window every night. Never tried to seduce anyone, just sang. The Sultan asked for her once, then never again. But I kept her. Married her off to a scholar. She writes me letters sometimes. Always includes a pressed flower. You wonder whether this story is true or just a parable in disguise. In the harem, truth is often dressed in costume. A fringe tidbit. It was believed that the Valid Sultan sometimes arranged transfers for harem women, pairing them with trusted officials, soldiers, or court poets. Not all concubines stayed caged. Some were quietly released into curated lives placed like chess pieces into households that suited the palace's long game. She reaches for one of the pearl boxes and opens it. Inside are small stones, smooth oval, each painted with a different color. She spills a few onto the table and arranges them absent-mindedly. Everything in this place is patterned, she says. Words, fabrics, even people. You recognize the look in her eyes now, not just intelligence, but strategy worn smooth with time. She's not playing a game anymore. She is the game. Historians still argue whether the Valid Sultan's power stemmed from love for her son or love for control. Was she a mother protecting the crown or a regent cloaked in maternal legitimacy? It depends on who's writing the history and whether they were invited for tea. She leans in slightly. Here's a lesson, she whispers. Every girl thinks the Sultan is the center. But the Sultan sleeps. He travels. He dies. Her fingers tap the pearl box. Mother's Day. She lifts the glass with the tulip and smells it once. Then almost offhandedly she says, that girl who left the song in the lattice. Don't let her wait too long. You blink. How does she know she doesn't explain? She doesn't need to. You're dismissed with a look not sharp, but final. A curtain of silk separates you from her again, and the sound of her voice is already dissolving into memory. As you step back into the corridor, your heart beats steady, but your thoughts racing. You realize you've been both warned and welcomed. And from here on, your path winds closer to the center of everything. Your slippers whisper across the marble as you leave the Valide Sultan's quarters, the rhythm of your step suddenly heavier with meaning. You're not just walking anymore, you're being observed. Every eye is an equation you must solve. Every curtain, possibly an ear. You think again of her words. Mother's Stay. The hallway curves left, then right, then opens into a room so grand it seems to mock every modest corner you've passed through until now. This is a pavilion chamber, dome ceiling draped in silks the color of pomegranate seeds and honey. Cushions spill like low hills and walls are painted with vines that seem to grow when you're not looking. There are women everywhere, lounging, whispering, adjusting garments, reading poetry aloud as though auditioning for a dream. The sound is hushed but vibrant, like wind stirring through scented pages. But it's not the opulence that makes you pause. It's the feeling. This is where rivalries live. You sense it instantly. The sharpness beneath the softness. The sweet aftertaste of something just slightly burned. These are the Sultan's favorites, the ones who've ascended not just by beauty, but by being better than every girl who once sat where you're sitting now. A mainstream fact, Ottoman sultans were allowed 4 official concubines at a time, women who held the title Haseki Sultan. These women, especially the chief consort, held not just romantic favor but immense political sway. They received stipends, gifts, property, and sometimes entire palaces of their own. Competition to become one was not just fierce, it was generational. You step to the side and take in the tableau. One consort reclines with a book of Rumi's poetry open across her lap. She recites softly but loud enough to draw attention. Another toys with a bracelet studded in emeralds that catch the light with suspicious regularity. A third, striking in her stillness, sits perfectly straight, pouring tea into the world's tiniest cup, not spilling a drop. You don't need anyone to point her out. You already know who holds the highest favor. She sits at the center, veiled just enough to make you lean forward, her hands resting atop an embroidered cushion the color of wet plum skin. She's not the most beautiful. That's what makes her dangerous. She doesn't need to be. She's chosen. And the others orbit her like moons, unsure whether to pull closer or tear themselves apart. She lifts her gaze and locks eyes with you. For a moment, nothing moves. Not her hands, not her veil. Just her eyes measuring, assessing, noting every thread in your robe and every shift in your shoulders. Then she smiles. Not a full smile. Just the corner of her mouth. It's enough to undo someone. You lower your eyes not out of submission, but strategy. There's power in playing unreadable. You sit beside a small table holding sugar-dusted dates, cubes of cheese, and what appears to be a pomegranate split open like a heart. You reach for a piece. A girl beside you gasps just softly, but you already touched it. Too late. You take the seed into your mouth. It's sour. A fringe detail? One tale speaks of a consort who served the Sultan pomegranate seeds, soaked in rose water and vinegar before a night she knew another rival would be summoned. He complained of a bitter mouth and sent the girl away. The plan worked. For a week. The woman in the center rises. Every other consort stills. Even the one reciting poetry fumbles her page. She walks toward the terrace slowly like a queen who was born knowing every eye in the room is hers to command. You expect silence. Instead, she speaks. "Tell me, sisters," she says, running her fingers along a flowering vine carved into the wall. "Do you think a tulip blooms more beautifully in shade or sun?" A pause. Then one girl says, "Shade makes the color richer." Another says, "Sun gives the scent its strength." The favorite turns to you. And what do you think? You answer carefully. It depends who's watching. A flutter of fans. One small surprised laugh. Even the favorite tilts her head just slightly. Approval, curiosity. A warning historians still argue whether rivalries in the harem were deadly or simply dramatic. Stories of poison-framed scandals and hair ripped out by moonlight flood the folklore. But palace records show far more subtle takedowns lost. Privileges, reassigned rooms, intercepted gifts. The blade was rarely needed. A whisper often did the job. You feel the change before you see it. The air shifts, a ripple moving through the room. One of the women has stood. Not the favorite, a challenger. She's younger, glowing from her bath, still damp at the temples. She walks to the terrace and stands beside the favorite shoulder to shoulder. Not behind, not below. The room stills. The favorite doesn't move. She simply fans herself once. Slowly. "You've seen that fan flick before, it means I saw you." Then she places a slice of quince on her tongue, chews once, and walks away without another glance. The challenger remains, and the rest of the room exhales. You finish your pomegranate seeds. Each one tastes a little different now, less sweet, more complicated. You remain seated for a while, unsure whether you've just witnessed a coup or performance, or in the harem the difference. Around you, conversation picks back up with the artificial ease of people pretending not to notice a lightning strike that just missed the courtyard. The rival remains by the terrace, her profile lit by the last amber glow of the afternoon. She's not smiling, not preening, just standing the air around her charged. She doesn't need applause. In this game, the audience is invisible and the rewards come quietly. If at all. You rise and drift toward a side corridor, your slippers soft against the tiles. The air grows cooler again. Less scented, more serious. You pass a window cut high into the wall, revealing a sliver of sky just beginning to bruise with evening. Somewhere nearby, someone strikes a match. And then you hear it. Music. Again. But this time, no lattice window. No perfume. No fanfare. Just a voice. Low. Male. Singing quietly almost to himself. You move toward the sound deeper into the wing that houses visiting tutors. Musicians, poets, men, permitted entry only by the Vlaid's blessing, and only under the watch of 3 separate eunuchs. You find him seated on a stone bench, back turned and oud balanced in his lap, like a sleeping animal. His fingers move with the kind of skill that doesn't show off. It simply breathes. He's not young, not old. But his voice is carved from honey and exile. He plays for no one. Which makes it honest. A mainstream fact. While most of the harem's inhabitants were female male artists and scholars were sometimes brought in for specific teachings, music, philosophy, even astronomy. Always chaperoned, always temporary, but their presence added a forbidden vibrance like thunder before a storm you're not allowed to acknowledge. You sit on a cushion near the doorway and listen. He's singing in a blend of Turkish and Arabic, the words delicate as spun sugar but heavy with ache. You don't need a translation. The language of longing needs no interpreter. And then you realize this song is familiar. The melody. It's the same one the girl with it Wowdy played behind the lattice. The one with the fig line. Only now, there are lyrics. You lean forward. She left her voice in the folds of a fan, where silence kissed the edge of command. The song goes on and you close your eyes. You picture her again, veiled alone, fingers dancing over strings like they were secrets she never wanted to tell. A fringe tidbit. In palace lore, it's whispered that certain concubines and poets maintained affairs through shared compositions, one starting a verse, another finishing it weeks later in performance. Forbidden duets, illicit harmonies, evidence hidden in plain song. Historians still debate whether these partnerships were romantic, strategic, or simply artistic symbiosis. Some argue they were metaphors. Others insist at least one execution can be traced back to a particularly revealing verse. You open your eyes. He's staring at you now, not startled, just aware. You know it, he says softly. You nod. He sets the oud aside and stands. No bow, no title. Just a man who knows he's said too much with too little. She's clever, he adds, but lonely. He leaves before you can ask who she is. But you already know. Of course you do. You remain there a moment longer, and then, curiosity flickering, you walk to the bench and lift the oud by its neck. The strings hum beneath your fingertips, still warm from where his hands once rested. You don't play, not yet. But something in you wants to. Instead, you turn and notice a folded piece of paper tucked beneath the cushion. Left for someone else. But now found by you. You open it. The same handwriting as before. The fig splits in silence. I have learned to wait without breath. No signature, no seal. Just a note passed between ghosts. You tuck it into your robe. Not to keep. Just to remember. As you return to the harem proper, the mood has changed again. Lanterns have been lit. Shadows stretch long across the mosaic floors. From somewhere deep inside, you hear laughter. Not cruel, not sharp, just real. Rare. And then a hush. The air thickens. The Sultan is coming. The hush arrives before he does. It spreads like perfume curling down corridors and sinking into the cushions. Laughter vanishes. Fans freeze mid-flutter. Conversations dry up mid-sentence, eyes widen, backs straighten. Even the eunuchs seem to stand taller as if their ribs have suddenly remembered discipline. The Sultan is coming. No footsteps, no trumpet. Just stillness and the knowledge that everything is about to mean more than it did 5 minutes ago. You press yourself gently into an alcove, half curious, half unwilling to interfere with the choreography about to unfold. A girl passes by with a tray of rose sherbet, her hands trembling ever so slightly. Another adjusts the hem of her robe with frantic elegance. It's not vanity, it's survival. And then, like a page turning itself, he appears. The Sultan. Not in golden robes, not dripping in rubies. That would be too easy. He wears indigo, plain, soft leather slippers. His beard is trimmed, his eyes lined in kohl, his hands bare. But when he enters the room, bends around him. Not physically, but atmospherically. Like a flame in a paper lantern drawing all heat and silence toward itself. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. A mainstream fact, Ottoman sultans rarely entered the harem. When they did, it was with intention, whether for companionship consultation with the Valid, or to visit one of his favored consorts. Every appearance was both casual and ceremonial, like thunder that pretends not to be storm. He moves through the chamber like a man in his own dream. Women lower their eyes, then lift them just enough to be noticed. One smiles. One remains utterly still, her stillness louder than a shout. The rival and the favorite are both here. You spot them from your alcove, seated just slightly apart. The favorite adjusts her scarf but doesn't rise. She doesn't need to. The rival does, standing slowly, deliberately, every fold of her robe choreographed like a fan in midair. He stops, looks at both of them, and walks past them, toward a low cushion. Your heart's pounding. Not because he looked at you, he didn't, but because his not looking has just redrawn the map of the room. The favorite frowns barely, the rival flinches slightly. The rest pretend not to notice what every molecule has already recorded. A fringe tidbit. There's a rumor, ridiculous but persistent, that a single blink from the Sultan could condemn a girl to exile or summon her to a private palace. This was, of course, nonsense. Probably. Yet girls practice their entrances in polished trays for weeks before a rumored visit. Just in case. He accepts a cup of sherbet from the trembling girl. Sips. Pauses. His eyes scan the room again. And stop. Not on the rival. Not on the favorite. On someone else. The musician's girl. You recognize her from the lattice. She's not dressed to impress, just modestly lovely. Her expression is calm, unreadable the way only someone with nothing left to lose can be. She doesn't smile. She doesn't bat her lashes. She just is. And in a room full of performance, that's its own form of sorcery. He rises. The eunuchs shift slightly, not a step, not a flinch, but a shift. They're listening to the room, measuring weight and breath. The Sultan walks to her, offers a gesture. Not a command, a question. She nods. He leads her through a curtain, and the rest of the chamber exhales like a flute set down after a long, slow note. Historians still argue whether harem women had genuine choice in such moments. Some say no, a nod was trained, not offered. Others claim subtle refusals were possible feigned headaches, fainting spells, mysterious disappearances into the bathhouse. Whether power or powerlessness, the difference was often paper-thin and heavily perfumed. You stand at the edge of the room now, no longer hiding. The favorite Remain seated her fingers, worrying the hem of her sleeve like it insulted her in another life. The rival is already gone, slipped away through a side door, and the girl who played for no one. She's walking beside the man who controls everything. The doors close behind them. A silence follows. Then quietly, a new melody begins from somewhere unseen. An oud. Again. Not triumphant, not mournful, just honest. The melody ripples through the chamber like warm tea spilling across silk. Soft, sure, impossible to ignore. No one claims it. No one looks for the musician, but everyone hears. And in this world of deliberate glances and wordless truths, the sound says more than any letter ever could. You drift toward the source, tracing the path through corridors dimly lit by amber lanterns that swing gently from the ceiling. The light wavers like memory, some parts bright, some fading, some never fully formed. You're heading not toward the Sultan or his chosen companion, but somewhere quieter. The infirmary. Yes, the harem has one. A place for fevers, twisted ankles, and things you're not supposed to admit hurt. You pass through a narrow arch and into a space that smells of thyme vinegar. And something else older, sharper. Truth, maybe. Inside you find a woman crouched over a bowl of crushed figs and dried apricots, mashing them together with a small silver pestle. Her sleeves are rolled to the elbow, and her veil is tucked loosely over one shoulder. She's not adorned. She's not waiting. She's working. This is the physician. A mainstream fact. The Ottoman Harem had its own tabib female physicians trained in herbalism. Galenic medicine and local remedies passed through generations. While men dominated the empire's formal medical institutions, harem women had their own systems of knowledge and healing. She glances up at you, eyes sharp but not unfriendly. Nothing broken, she asks. Not expecting an answer. You shake your head. Shame, she mutters. The ones with bruises always tell the best stories. You smile despite yourself. She stands and moves toward a shelf lined with ceramic jars, each labeled in faded ink, each holding fragments of empire-dried rose hips, saffron threads, bits of coral opium resin powdered rhubarb. I treat pain, she says, but I listen for poison. You raise an eyebrow. Not always the kind you drink, she adds. She hands you a small vial filled with clear oil. Anise and mint, she says. For sleeplessness, or for too many thoughts. You take it carefully. It's warm from her palm, a fringe tidbit. Some tabibs in the palace were former concubines who never rose in the ranks but remained in the harem as healers passing down knowledge through whispers and injuries. Their roles were unofficial, their presence unquestioned. They were the ones who kept things from unraveling. She begins preparing another mixture, honey pomegranate rind and crushed pearl. For headaches, she explains. Or heartbreak. They look the same from the outside. You ask her how long she's been here. She doesn't answer with years. Long enough to know she says. A pause. Know what that ambition bruises slower than skin. You sit beside her as she mixes the rhythm of her mortar like a soft drum beat beneath the hush. You watch her grind, stir, pour, wrap, each motion efficient, practiced quiet. There is something deeply comforting about a woman who knows what to do with her hands when the world frays. You glance at the corner of the room and see a small painted tile loose in the wall. It wobbles slightly, the only imperfection in an otherwise controlled space. She catches your gaze. "That's where I keep my mistakes," she says dryly. You laugh. She doesn't. You reach out and touch the edge of the tile but don't move it. Not yet. "Be careful," she says, "you'll start thinking everyone's human." She ties off a muslin pouch and hands it to you. "Put this under your pillow," she says. "It doesn't heal anything, but it smells like something that could." You thank her. She shrugs. "People come here for ointments," she says, "but they really want permission to feel whatever they're feeling." You look back at the door. The melody's still playing somewhere softer now, as if it's been swallowed by the walls. You ask her who the girl is, the one who went with the Sultan. She doesn't look up. The one who plays the oud you nod. "She used to sit in that corner," the physician says. "Pretended she was waiting for me to bandage a blister. She just wanted quiet." You don't say anything. She plays with feeling, the physician adds. "That's dangerous." You ask why. She answers while grinding dried lemon peel into powder. "Because someone might feel back." You take your leave, muslin pouch in hand, oil in your pocket, thoughts spinning. Outside, the corridors have hushed again. The scent of burnt sugar drifts through the air. Someone has begun preparing pastries for later. Always there's a later in the harem. Later tonight. Later this week. Later in a memory you haven't lived yet? And the girl with the oud, she's playing less now? Maybe because someone has finally listened. You walk slowly now, not because you're tired, but because the palace has changed around you. Not literally the walls are the same. The lanterns still sway in their half-lit rhythm. The tiles still whisper underfoot. But something has shifted. You've passed through scent, sound, and power. Now you enter the realm of dreams, and not your own. This room, soft lit and curtained like a lullaby, is where the concubines sleep. Not all of them, of course. Some have private chambers, some have been summoned elsewhere, but here beneath the cypress-carved rafters lie the younger ones, the newer ones. The girls who don't yet know what their role will be, only that their lives are no longer their own. The moment you enter the hush deepens. Not out of fear, but instinct. Sleep is sacred here, not just for rest, but as rehearsal. In a world that demands performance, while awake, even dreams must carry meaning. A girl sleeps nearby, her face half buried in a velvet cushion embroidered with birds. Another turns in her sheets, murmuring something in a dialect you don't recognize. Someone hums a lullaby too quietly to identify the voice. You spot her. The girl with the aoud. She isn't playing. She's curled beneath a cream-colored throw, her hair splayed like calligraphy across the pillow. Her face is relaxed, but not entirely. There's tension at the corners of her mouth, a question still caught between sleep and memory. You kneel beside her, careful not to disturb. You feel as if you're trespassing in someone else's dream. A mainstream fact: Ottoman concubines, especially the younger ones, shared dormitory-style spaces until they were assigned permanent quarters. These common rooms were watched over by older women, former favorites, retired guardians who kept order with a glance, a whisper, or a bedtime story that might also be a warning. You hear one now. At the far end of the room, an elderly woman sits against the wall, speaking softly to a group of half-awake girls. Her voice is low and rich with fatigue, the kind that only comes from living through many, many almosts. And the fig, she says, split quietly as it always does. And inside it was not sweetness, but a second fig. The girls laugh softly like they've been told to laugh, but don't quite understand why. One of them pulls her blanket tighter. Another murmurs, "I like the stories where nothing bad happens." The old woman pauses. "Then you shouldn't listen too closely. A fringe tidbit. It's said that some of the older harem women created entire mythologies just for the girls. Allegories wrapped in fruit-veiled animals and impossible gardens. These stories passed from dormitory to dormitory like heirlooms, without owners, shifting slightly with each retelling. Gaining wisdom like a stone gathers moss. You walk to the window. The moon has risen now, slicing through the sky like a fingernail mark across silk. Its light touches the sleeping girls like a blessing or a dare. You glance back at the girl with the ayud. She stirs. Eyes flutter. She sees you. Only for a second. You're not sure she's fully awake. But in that brief moment, you see it, recognition. Not of your face, perhaps, but of something you carry. An echo. A melody. The shape of an answer she hasn't yet asked for. Then her eyes close again, and her lips part as if to say something, but no sound comes. Only breath. You step back, your own heart unsure of its tempo. She's dreaming. And you've entered that dream. Historians still argue whether concubines were allowed to keep personal possessions, trinkets, notes, even instruments. Some claim all was surrendered at the gates of the harem. Others say a few hidden objects survived a music box, a seashell, a folded scrap of cloth from a sister long lost. You suspect the truth, as usual, lies somewhere in between. The oud sits beside her bed, quiet now, its strings stilled, but not silenced. It holds her secrets, her strength, her longing, perhaps her only voice. You turn to leave and find the elderly woman beside you as if she's always been there. She plays better when she's sad, the old woman whispers. That's when her fingers remember who she was before the veil. You ask her what the girl dreams about. She smiles slow and slanted. Freedom, probably. You raise an eyebrow. To leave, no, she says. To stay and still be herself. She walks away, her robes brushing the tiles like the final lines of a bedtime story. You watch the girls as they settle into deeper sleep. Each carries her own story stitched into the hem of her nightdress. Each has a part in a play she didn't audition for. And in this room of soft breath and dried rose petals, the most dangerous thing isn't ambition or rivalry or desire. It's hope. You step lightly out of the dormitory, careful not to let the door click behind you. The air outside feels sharper now, laced with cinnamon smoke and the sour sweetness of overripe grapes. Somewhere in the palace a dessert is being prepared, or a strategy. You follow the hall's curve and emerge into a side chamber lit only by lanterns set low to the floor. Here the shadows don't climb the walls. They lounge thick and fragrant, curling around the furniture like bored cats. The room is empty, but the tension isn't. You've walked into a space recently vacated, still warm with presence. And then you see it. A hairpin. Just one. Laid neatly on a cushion. Silver, not gold. Shaped like a fig leaf, of course. You recognize the leaf's shape from the henna patterns, from the embroidery on the oud player's sash, from the garnish on a cup of pomegranate sherbet earlier in the day. It's been following you. Or you've been following it. You hear footsteps. Two women enter from opposite sides of the room. Not loudly, not urgently, but with the distinct air of people who knew exactly when and where they were meant to arrive. It's the favorite. And the challenger. Again. They face each other across the room, not speaking. Their silence is far louder than anything the OUD could play. You retreat a little, but not far. If you're going to understand this place, this moment matters. The favorite picks up the silver hairpin. She twirls it between her fingers like a blade disguised as jewelry. "Do you miss your village?" she asks finally. The challenger tilts her head. "Do you remember yours?" A pause. Then laughter, short, sharp, musical. They both sit. Not together. But not apart either. The favorite rests the pin beside her. "He hasn't called for either of us," she says. "Not since..." She doesn't finish. She doesn't have to. You know who she means. The oud player. A mainstream fact. In the Ottoman Harem, the Sultan often favored one woman for long stretches of time. These women, called Haseki sultans, could hold influence for years until another caught his interest. The shift could be sudden, or agonizingly slow, and everyone felt it. "I saw her," the challenger says. "In the bathhouse." "She doesn't look like she's trying. She doesn't have to," the favorite replies. A servant enters briefly to refill the incense burner, and the scent of cinnamon thickens. You almost laugh, as if either of these women needs help feeling warm. They stare at the smoke for a while, each waiting for the other to flinch. You wonder who will speak first, who will surrender to civility, who will throw the first compliment masked as poison. It's the favorite. "She plays beautifully," she says. "Do you think she knows how dangerous that is?" "She must," the challenger says. "She's still alive." They sip from a shared cup of tea, each pretending not to notice the other's trembling pinky finger. A fringe tidbit. Ottoman tea customs in the harem were strange blends of affection and espionage. Some women could decode moods by how sweet someone poured their tea or whether they drank at all. One harem tale speaks of a sugar cube carved with a single word. Enough. She doesn't want power, the favorite says. No, the challenger agrees. That's why she has it. A long silence stretches between them. For a moment you forget they are rivals. You forget they were taught to hate each other with smiles. They seem like girls again. And then the favorite reaches for the hairpin, this time holding it with more weight than before. "She'll fall," she says, "like the rest of us." "No," the challenger replies. "She'll vanish before she breaks." Another silence. Then together like a line rehearsed. "We're the ones who break." Historians still argue whether these rivalries were shaped by love, jealousy, or desperation. But those who lived here, the quiet ones, the attentive ones, they say something different. The true battle wasn't over the Sultan. It was over how much of yourself you could keep. The favorite places the hairpin back on the cushion. Neither woman moves to claim it. You step away, leaving them behind in their cinnamon smoke and unspoken grief. As you exit the chamber, you pass another girl walking toward them. Her eyes are soft. Her hands are empty. She carries no fan, no mirror, no blade. But you sense she will leave with something. The hairpin is waiting. The corridors seem narrower now, though nothing in the stone has changed. Maybe it's just the weight of what you've overheard, the softness of power when whispered between rivals, and the sharp edges it leaves behind. You walk on each footfall, swallowed by carpet so thick you can't feel the floor anymore. Then, without warning, it happens. The sound of silk shifting. The smell of cloves and leather, and the sudden hush. He's here. The Sultan. Again. This time you don't hear whispers before he arrives. No ripples, no warning. He simply appears, as if conjured. As if the palace itself decided to remind everyone who it breathes for. He steps into the courtyard ahead where the lanterns have already been lit. A soft breeze tugs at their tassels. Shadows flicker across his robe as he walks blue trimmed in silver. Understated again, deliberate, he doesn't walk alone. Beside him is the oud player, the girl who was never trying. She's veiled now, but lightly, just enough to suggest privacy, not concealment. She walks one step behind, but her spine is straight, and she does not look down. If she is nervous, she has buried it under layers of breath. You and everyone else freeze. It's not that anyone has told you to stop. It's that you must. This is the dance. A mainstream fact Sultan visits to the harem were never entirely spontaneous, even when they seemed so. Courtiers, eunuchs, and the Valid Sultan herself often played roles in the timing and staging of his appearances. Nothing was random, even his silences were rehearsed. The couple reaches the fountain at the courtyard's center. Its water glistens in the lamplight. It's quieter here than it was earlier, like the koi beneath the surface have even decided to still themselves for the performance. The Sultan speaks. Not loudly, just clearly. Will you play? The girl doesn't hesitate. She removes her veil gracefully without drama and hands it to one of the eunuchs. Then she kneels barefoot now before a cushion already placed beneath a jasmine trellis. The oud is brought to her by another attendant. She doesn't thank him, but she touches the instrument like it remembers her fingers. She plays, and everything stops. You've heard her music before behind lattices in moonlight from memory, but never like this. Not in the open. Not with every ear tilted toward her breath. Each note lands like a coin dropped into water, small ripples, endless reach. Even the Sultan closes his eyes, and you, though you are only watching, feel the shift. Her fingers move like they're remembering something the rest of her has tried to forget. She plays the song with the fig, then something slower, something older. A melody no one speaks about, but everyone knows. The air around her thickens. A breeze picks up. A curtain flutters. Someone somewhere exhales through their nose and pretends not to wipe their eyes. A fringe detail. There's an unconfirmed account in the journals of a Venetian ambassador who claimed to have witnessed a concubine play music. So moving it caused the Sultan to cancel an execution scheduled for the next morning. He never proved it, but the story lived. Tonight feels like that. As she finishes, she lifts her hand and pauses. One note hovers, unplayed. She lets it hang, then lowers her hand. The song ends. Not with a chord, with a choice. The Sultan opens his eyes. He doesn't clap. He doesn't smile. He simply nods. But in this world, that's an earthquake. The girl bows her head, but not too low. Not in submission, in punctuation. And then she rises and walks away. Not toward him. Back into the harem. You turn expecting to follow her shadow down the nearest hallway. But instead the Sultan speaks again. One moment, the room stills. Again. She pauses. Turns. And for the first time you see her falter. Just slightly. Her breath catches. Her eyes lift. Yes, my lord. His voice is softer now. Play the last note. She hesitates, then walks back, sits again, raises her fingers and plucks the note. One. Simple. Sound. And for some reason that one note is the one that splits the air. That's the one that echoes. That's the one you'll remember. Historians still argue whether the harem was theater or sanctuary, whether moments like this were staged or true. But what you just witnessed, that was real. The note still vibrates in your chest as you wander away from the courtyard, the oud's resonance echoing softly in the arches and high ceilings. You're not sure if the girl returned to her dormitory or vanished into the folds of legend, but the air she leaves behind feels heavier, full of something. Memory, maybe, or momentum. You find yourself in a smaller hallway now, its walls darker closer, but glittering here and there with inlaid mother of pearl. At first you think it's just decoration, but as you squint you realize it's script. Lines of Ottoman Turkish curling like ivy across the panels. Too faded to read easily, too beautiful to ignore. And then you find it. A small wooden cabinet hidden behind a veil of beads and shadow. Its doors are open and within lies something unexpected, a diary. Bound in soft leather, clasped shut with the brass leaf no bigger than your thumb. You hesitate, but this is the harem. Everything important is hidden behind hesitation. You open it, and you fall in. The first page is written in violet ink. Not black, not brown. Violet. The kind of color you'd expect from someone who understands exactly how far beauty can be bent before it becomes defiance. Today I learned how to watch without staring, how to laugh with no sound, how to be remembered without speaking. You turn the page. They think the veil protects us, but I've learned it reflects. I see myself in others now like ripples in the bathwater. Some days I'm the favorite, some days the poison, most days, both. Your fingers tremble slightly as you read. You're not supposed to be here, but someone meant for this to be found. A mainstream fact. Though few survive, many women of the Ottoman court kept diaries. Often written in coded language or poetry, these journals captured the rhythms of harem life from the inside, mundane, majestic, and mournful all at once. You flip forward. He passed me today in the courtyard. His eyes did not linger, but I felt the warmth of the space his glance might have filled. Is it wrong to long for a look that never happened? You smile a sad smile because, no, it's not wrong. But in this place, longing is a currency with no exchange rate. It changes nothing. And everything. There's a pressed tulip between two pages. Flattened, dried, forgotten. It leaves a faint brown kiss on both sides of the paper. You notice another passage tucked in the back, scrawled hastily, almost angrily. The Valid says stillness is power. That moving too quickly reminds them we are real. Real women are dangerous. But I've seen the birds in the courtyard. They never stop moving, and they're still here. A fringe tidbit. Some concubines wrote their journals on fabric strips of linen silk, even handkerchiefs, then stitched the pages into their garments or pillows. Discovery meant punishment, but the fear of being erased was worse than the fear of being caught. You close the diary slowly. There's a ribbon tied to its spine, worn soft from fingers, hers probably. You wrap it again as gently as it was first tied. This wasn't meant to be preserved in gold. It was meant to be passed. As you replace the diary, you notice a second object in the cabinet. A small bottle of perfume, violet and amber, sharp with nostalgia. You dab a bit on your wrist without thinking. The scent clings like memory. And suddenly the air around you feels layered with women who wore this before you. Women who wrote, waited, loved, and vanished. You step away quieter now. Not out of fear, but reverence. Because you've just touched someone else's silence. And it touched back. Historians still debate whether the voices of harem women truly shaped the empire or whether they were simply echoes in its halls. But if power is the ability to be remembered, then this girl, whoever she was, just ruled your thoughts. You exit into a side garden lit only by moonlight. Olive trees sway. A cat slips past your feet, uninterested in your emotional revelations. You stand beneath the stars, the perfume still on your wrist, the words still in your head. And you wonder, was this her plan all along? The garden opens before you like a secret only the moon knows how to keep. Olive trees whisper in the evening wind, their silver-green leaves shimmering under the lantern's glow. You've stepped out from words and rooms and veils into stillness. Or so it seems. Until you notice the table. It's long, low, and draped in white linen that trails onto the grass like the hem of a forgotten wedding gown. On it, golden platters gleam beneath silver domes, and delicate bowls hold candied fruits, figs, pistachios, and slices of pale melon chilled on crystal. Cushions encircle the table already pressed where someone recently sat, or perhaps where they were meant to. You've found the night feast. It's not for you, of course. Nothing here ever is. But you approach anyway. The sweet scent of rose syrup hangs in the air heavier now, mingled with mint and the faintest trace of something sharper. Something bitter. You pick up a silver goblet, feel its weight. It's full. Sherbet, again rosewater probably, or saffron. You hesitate, and for good reason. A mainstream fact poison was a fear so real in the Ottoman court that food tasters were part of every royal meal. Silver was said to tarnish when exposed to certain poisons, and some goblets were forged with trace amounts of antimony to absorb toxins. Still, accidents happened. Or accidents, rather. You don't sip. Instead, you take in the scene. Servants move like shadows, barely seen adjusting dates on a platter, straightening a crooked napkin, trimming the wick of an oil lamp without disturbing the flame. Everything gleams, but nothing feels warm. A consort walks in slowly, her veil translucent in the moonlight. She smiles at another who returns it, but too fast, like throwing a coin in a fountain you don't believe in. They sit cross-legged, facing one another, but not quite connecting. They begin to eat. One takes only fruit. Another breaks bread and dips it in yogurt tinged pink with beetroot. The third stares at a fig, but does not touch it. A low conversation starts not in Turkish, but Persian. The tone is sweet. The subtext is salted. She's quieter lately, one says, licking sherbet from her finger. Because she's being listened to, replies another. Laughter, not kind. They're speaking of the oud player. Of course. Another woman joins them, dragging a cushion a little too loudly. She carries a napkin embroidered with tulips, not in thread, but in gold. A fringe tidbit. In one legend, a consort commissioned a silk napkin stitched with gold thread, spelling out a poem visible only when held to candlelight. She used it during a feast where another favorite spilled wine across her sleeve. The Sultan reportedly laughed but never summoned the spiller again. Tonight's feast has tension baked into every bite. A girl reaches for a sugar-dusted fig. She hesitates, then bites. The flavor bursts sweet, rich, familiar, and yet her face tightens. Something is wrong, not with the fig, with the air, the tension, the pressure. It's not poison, it's position. She places the fig back down and drinks water instead. You move closer to the edge of the table, watching how the plates glisten, how the spoons are placed slightly to the left, not custom. That means someone set this table in haste. Or in rage. You glance toward the head of the table. No one sits there. But someone will. Because this isn't a feast, it's a stage. The Sultan hasn't arrived, nor has the valide. But everyone's waiting like they might. or like they're pretending they won't in order to seem above the hope that they might. One girl finally stands. She picks up her plate still half full and walks to the fountain at the far end of the garden. She tips her food into the water, not waste. Message. You don't stay long after that. There's a coldness to this feast no matter how sweet the sherbet, no matter how soft the dates. Historians still argue whether these gatherings were for pleasure or performance. Some suggest they fostered camaraderie between women. Others insist they were trials in disguise, each bite an audition, each silence a political misstep. Maybe both are true. You walk away from the table down a path where the olive trees thicken. A bird chirps once out of time with the night. Then silence. The stars overhead look the same, but you feel further away from them than ever. Behind you, laughter erupts again, but it's hollow now. Echoing through a garden that serves beauty cold and politics colder. You walk deeper into the garden where olive trees give way to cypress, tall, narrow, watchful. Their trunks rise like ancient sentinels, and the moonlight slips between their branches in long, pale slashes. The path is worn but winding, leading to a place few come without reason. Ahead, stone benches appear in the shadows, circled around a central space where a shallow basin glistens with water. At its center stands a single marble column entwined with vines. The scent here is different, earthier, older, less about roses and more about soil, wind, and time. This is not a place for feasts or performances. This is where secrets go to breathe. A woman is already seated on the far bench. You almost don't notice her. Her veil is dark, her posture still her presence, almost intentional in its quiet. You pause unsure whether to interrupt, but she gestures once, barely lifting her fingers. You sit. For a long while, neither of you speaks. Then she murmurs, "This is where they used to meet." You look at her. Her eyes are fixed on the column, not you. The Valide and the old Grand Vizier, she continues. Before her son took the throne, before she became untouchable. You want to ask how she knows this, but instead you wait. She would bring him pomegranate seeds wrapped in cloth. He would leave her letters folded like swans. A soft breeze rustles the leaves above. And then one day she stopped coming. A mainstream fact. The gardens of Topkapi Palace were as political as the throne room. Cypress groves were often used for private meetings, hushed confrontations, and whispered goodbyes. Some corners of the garden earned nicknames like the widow's turn or the brother's pause. Always poetic, always coded. You reach down and brush your fingers across the rim of the basin. It's cool. Moss clings to the edges. Floating in the water, 3 white petals drift in lazy circles. She played for him last night, the woman says. You know exactly who she means. He hasn't spoken of her since. You tilt your head. That's good. The woman shrugs. It means he's thinking. Another long silence stretches between you, but it doesn't feel empty. It feels like standing beside someone who has spent her entire life listening. She's clever, the woman says almost to herself. But soft. The clever ones usually last. The soft ones usually break. But when someone is both, she trails off. You finish for her. They're dangerous. She nods. A fringe tidbit. It was believed among harem women that the cypress tree symbolized stillness and grief, its height and narrow shape mimicking a candle's flame. Many of them requested to be buried near cypress trees, not because of religion, because they believed the tree would remember the names no one else would speak. You stand stretching slowly. She remains seated. Before you leave, you ask quietly, Do you think she knows what she's doing? The woman smiles very faintly. No one here ever knows. We only guess. And perform. And hope the veil holds long enough to protect the truth. You take one last look at the column, the vines coiled like questions around its base. The pomegranate tree nearby leans slightly, its lowest fruit just out of reach. You walk past it. The girl who played has not come here tonight, but her absence speaks louder than any song. As you return toward the lantern path, a thought settles into your bones, not heavy but stubborn. The girl who never asked for favor now holds it, and every woman in this place feels the shift. Not with fear, but calculation. You glance back at the column once more, barely visible now in the dark. Someone was here before her. Someone will be here after. But tonight, just tonight, the garden waits. The cypress garden fades behind you, its breathless stillness, trailing at your heels like a cloak of quiet. But as you re-enter the inner grounds of the harem, the air changes again, thicker, sweeter, a little too sweet. You know this scent. Pomegranate. It draws you down a narrow colonnade where a small table is set beneath an open archway. On it, a simple bowl of pomegranate seeds glistens in the lantern light, ruby red, plump, perfect, and completely untouched. You hesitate. A single bowl, a single fruit left out under a moon that's just begun to wane. It's too precise to be a coincidence. A consort emerges from the far side of the courtyard. You recognize her. She's not the favorite, not the musician, not the rival. She's one of the quiet ones, the watchers, the ones who never stand at the front of the room but always seem to know what everyone else has said. She walks toward the table. Her movements are slow, deliberate. She picks up one seed. Just one. Rolls it between her fingers. Then places it back. You watch her face carefully. There's something brittle about her calm tonight, like it's been polished too much. She sits beside the bowl, her eyes never leaving it. You approach cautiously and sit opposite her. She doesn't greet you. Instead, she says, "Do you know what a poisoned promise tastes like? A beet." "Sweet," she answers herself. Always sweet. A mainstream fact. Pomegranates were more than just fruit in Ottoman symbolism. They represented fertility, power, dynasty, so many seeds in one skin. A sultan's gift of pomegranate was considered a gesture of favor. But in palace rumor, the fruit also carried darker associations. Betrayal, seduction, quiet revenge. The woman gestures at the bowl. That was meant for her, she says. You don't ask who, you don't need to. But she didn't come. She continues. She went with him instead, played her little song, left the rest of us sitting in silence. You glance down at the seeds. They shine perfect as blood beads. No bite marks, no spills. The stillness of the bowl unnerves you. She doesn't know the stories the woman murmurs. She hasn't read the old poems. She's still trying to make music. A wind picks up, tossing a lock of her hair across her face. She tucks it back. Her hand lingers by her ear fingers, trembling just slightly. She thinks honesty is enough. She smiles then, a sad, brittle thing. It never is. A fringe tidbit. There's a tale unverified but persistent of a concubine who placed a single bitter pomegranate seed in a bowl of sugared ones. It was never meant to kill. Just to remind, the girl who bit into it was not punished. She was sent away, quietly, respectfully. She never returned. You ask gently, "Did you put it there?" The woman looks at you finally fully. "No," she says, "but I watched it happen." She leans back against the cushion, her hands folding into her lap, like silk ribbons curling inward. There are so many ways to say be careful, she adds. But sometimes, we want the lesson to bruise. You rise to leave, but she stops you with a glance. Take one, she says, nodding to the bowl. You hesitate. Just one. You reach forward and pick up a single seed. You don't eat it, you place it in your pocket. She watches you unreadable. Good, she says. You understand? You leave her there sitting beside the bowl of glistening promises. You walk back through the arches, the scent of pomegranate trailing behind like a hand brushing the back of your neck. Historians still argue whether such quiet rebellions truly occurred, whether women of the harem wielded fruit and fragrance like daggers. But then again, most of history's loudest moments begin with something small. A glance, a seed, a silence. Later, when you're alone in your chamber, you pull the seed from your pocket. You place it on the table, and you watch it, because some promises aren't meant to be eaten. They're meant to be remembered. You sleep lightly that night, if at all. The palace breathes around you, its sighs rising through the floor, its dreams rustling in curtains, its regrets tapping softly against the lattice window. Somewhere deep within you hear the oud again. Just one note. A ghost of a song. By dawn you're already awake. The sky outside is bruised lavender, barely kissed by the rising sun. The air feels new, unsettled, as if something delicate has broken, but quietly, as things tend to break here. You step into the corridor and follow the breeze. It leads you to a room you've never noticed before. You're certain it wasn't here yesterday. But that's the thing about the harem doors appear when the stories behind them are ready to be told. Inside is nothing but fabric. Veils, so many veils. Pale ones, dark ones, veils edged with gold, with fringe with tiny pearls. They hang from the ceiling like a forest made of breath and memory. You step through them slowly, your fingers brushing each one. They feel like voices, like warnings, like old friends you never quite saw clearly. And then you reach the center, a mirror. Tall silver framed its surface dimmed slightly with age. You look into it, and the veils look back. You see yourself, but layered, shadowed, half-veiled. You're not sure who you are anymore, not within this palace of glances and games. But you know you've become part of it, a mainstream fact. In the Ottoman harem, veils were never just fabric. They were signals, dividers, invitations. They represented modesty, yes, but also power. To veil something is to say this is valuable. To unveil it is to change the balance of the room. You take a seat on a low cushion in front of the mirror. Behind you, a soft rustle. You turn. It's the oud player, unveiled. She walks without hesitation, barefoot robe, trailing behind like a river. Her eyes meet yours in the mirror first. Steady calm, carrying a kind of sadness that doesn't bend. Only waits. She sits beside you. For a long moment, neither of you speak. Then she lifts a veil from the ground and places it in your lap. It's not to hide, she says softly. It's to decide who gets to see. You touch the fabric. It's finer than any silk you've ever known. It carries a faint scent, rose and wood smoke. She looks into the mirror again, her reflection layered with yours. You've been watching us, she says, listening. You nod. Then you know she continues that this place is not what it seems. You ask her if she wants to leave. She smiles gently. No. I want to stay. But I want to stay as me. She stands and walks behind the mirror, disappearing between veils. You expect her to return? She doesn't. Only the mirror remains. Only the veil in your lap. A fringe tidbit. Some harem women believe that each veil worn carried a memory, and that removing it too quickly could spill the memory into the walls. There were stories of veils hung in secret corners, never touched again for fear of waking whatever sadness they contained. You rise and drape the veil over the mirror. Not to forget her, to protect her. Because now you understand. The veil isn't the prison, it's the choice. You leave the room quietly, and when you look back, it's gone. Historians still debate what veiling meant for the women of the Ottoman court oppression agency, elegance erasure, but they always speak from outside the veil. Inside, the truth changes depending on who holds the fabric, and who dares to lift it. The palace wakes slowly, like a great cat stretching in sunlight its limbs long. With tradition, its yawn filled with ceremony. Servants begin their soft clatter in the background. Slippers shuffle. Water is poured. The scent of cardamom drifts in from the kitchens. Morning has come, but not without cost. Someone is missing. You feel it before you hear it. A wrongness in the corridors. An empty hum in the air like a note left out of a familiar song. You follow instinct more than direction, your feet taking you through a hallway you haven't walked before. The tiles here are simpler. The walls bare. This is not a part of the palace meant for display. You round the corner and a eunuch is there, alone. He doesn't look at you, but his stillness is too loud to ignore. You stop, and he says she's gone. He doesn't clarify who. He doesn't need to. You ask carefully, where he shakes his head. No one knows. There was no summons. No message. No struggle. You ask, was it the oud player? A long silence. Then yes. Just like that. The girl who played the notes no one else dared has disappeared. A mainstream fact. When a favored concubine vanished from the harem, official explanations were rarely given. Sometimes they were reassigned. Married off, sent to distant palaces. Sometimes it was exile. Other times it was simply erasure. A name removed from the roster. A room cleaned before the morning call to prayer. You stand frozen, your breath caught somewhere between surprise and certainty. You knew this was coming, you just didn't know it would feel like this. The eunuch finally meets your eyes. She left something, he says. He leads you down a narrow stairwell through a small door into a private chamber. It's modest, a few cushions, a clay oil lamp, a folded blanket, and on a small wooden stool, the oud, alone now, its strings still tuned. Beside it a letter. Your name isn't on it, but you know it's meant for you. You unfold it carefully. The ink is violet. If you are reading this, it means the music has stopped. But I am not broken. I chose to go. Before they would turn me into something I wasn't. I loved the walls, but they began to echo more than they listened, and I wanted silence that belonged to me. Play for yourself now. Not for him. Not for them. For the sound that reminds you who you were before the veils. No signature. Just a pressed petal tucked into the corner. A jasmine. You sit beside the oud, not daring to touch it yet. The room is too full of her absence. And, oddly, her presence. You look around. The cushion still carries the imprint of her weight. The blanket still holds the fold of her body. She left gently, not in fear, not in rage. She slipped out the way she once played, deliberate, quiet, unforgettable. A fringe detail. Some harem women who disappeared were said to send coded messages back into the palace, hidden in the patterns of woven sashes, the inflection of traveling songs, or even in the names of newborn girls passed into distant households. You wonder if she'll do the same. You stand heart heavier than you expected. Not broken, just heavier. The eunuch watches you unreadable. Then quietly he says, "She never tried to become a queen." You nod. That's why she was dangerous. As you walk back through the corridors, the palace hums on, as if nothing happened, but something did, and everyone knows it. Later that morning in the courtyard, a girl hums a tune you recognize. You glance over, it's one of the younger ones. Hair still damp from the bathhouse. Eyes full of not knowing. She plucks a note into the air with her fingers, pretending the movement of a string. The melody hangs there, incomplete. You walk on, but you hum the next line, because the song didn't vanish. It was planted. The sun now sits higher in the sky, its light shifting from gold to ivory, pooling across the palace like silk, unfurled from the heavens. And yet the harem feels dimmer. Not darker, just quieter. You wander back through the spaces that once felt dense with tension, music plotting. And now they feel paused. Like the whole world has taken a breath it refuses to let out. You arrive at the embroidery room, a chamber filled with threads and thimbles with soft laughter and silent concentration. Here the women stitch their hours away not merely in boredom but in strategy. You learn quickly that embroidery in the harem isn't about art, it's about control. Today the mood in the room is stiff. The favorite is here. So is the challenger. They sit at separate frames, heads bent needles, flicking in and out of fabric like metal birds pecking at secrets. You step quietly inside. The room smells of beeswax and cloves. A tray of water sits near the window, reflecting both sky and suspicion. A servant hands you a cloth to stitch. You accept it. No one asks if you know how. You learn as you go, like everything else here. The girl beside you leans over and whispers, "She's not coming back. Is she?" You don't answer, not out of cruelty, but because you know the answer means too many things. A mainstream fact in the Ottoman Harem embroidery was both pastime and punishment. Mistakes in design could result in revoked privileges. Masterpieces could be given as gifts to the Sultan or foreign ambassadors. It was also a form of communication. Flowers meant one thing, birds another. A missing petal. A message. You glance over at the favorite. Her work is flawless, of course. Tulips crescent stars stitched so precisely they seem printed, not born of hand and needle. Then you look at the challenger, and you pause. She's stitching jasmine, and not just one. An entire field of jasmine flowers. You realize she's filling the whole cloth with them over and over. No pattern, just repetition. As if she's trying to remember something that's already gone. You breathe slowly. The favorite sees it too, but says nothing. The silence thickens, then splits open when a younger girl drops her needle. It clinks against the tiled floor. No one flinches. Except the girl. She whispers an apology, bends to retrieve it, and when she sits back up you see the hem of her robe, embroidered of course. A small tulip. Tipped upside down. A fringe tidbit. In some palace tales, girls would reverse the orientation of a symbol in their embroidery to signal resistance or mourning. An upside-down tulip was said to mean favor lost, or less poetically, not playing anymore. You find your fingers moving now, not by habit, but by instinct. You stitch a single jasmine petal in the corner of your cloth. No one will notice. Or so you hope. The embroidery master walks through the room with the softness of someone who's spent her entire life resisting the urge to run. She inspects the favorite's work, nods once, then pauses by the challenger, and stays. For a moment too long. The older woman says nothing, just moves on, but the tension lingers. The challenger exhales softly. Her fingers resume. You finish your row and fold the cloth over your lap. Someone across the room begins humming. Lo, the tune is familiar. It's her melody, the girl who vanished. It spreads through the room like perfume on steam. No one stops it. No one claims it. But within minutes, it's everywhere on lips and breath and memory. The favorite looks up. Her eyes meet the challengers. They hold, then drop. Another girl hums a harmony beneath the tune. It's not rebellion, it's remembrance. And maybe that's more dangerous. You rise, leaving your needle tucked just slightly askew in the cloth, another message. As you exit the room, the last notes of the melody slip into the hallway with you. Historians still argue whether harem culture bred unity or division, whether the women were pitted against each other or secretly allied by the sheer strangeness of their world. But here in the stitchwork of shadows, you realize something deeper. Sometimes solidarity doesn't come from agreement. Sometimes it comes from absence. And from the songs that survive it. The hallway outside the embroidery room feels strangely hollow, like someone has removed all the sound from the air and replaced it with breath. You walk without direction, letting your feet trace the edges of memory. Each turn brings you somewhere that should feel familiar but doesn't. And then you see it. The fan. Resting on a windowsill as though forgotten. But nothing is ever forgotten here. Ivory ribbed silk face embroidered with a single tulip this time. Upright, fully bloomed edges kissed in silver thread. It catches the light just so. A fan like this isn't placed, it's left. You pick it up carefully. There's something missing. One of the ribs is gone, cleanly removed. Not broken. Taken. You look down the hallway half expecting someone to be watching. But you're alone. You open the fan. It's stiff, used rarely. Decorative, not practical. Then behind it something glints. Tucked inside the fold a slat. The missing one. But not ivory. It's wood. Carved. You slide it free and examine the engraving. Just a few words etched in small, slanted Ottoman script. There is no silence louder than a fan unopened. You tuck the slat into your robe. Whoever placed it here wanted it found. A mainstream fact. In Ottoman court culture, the fan became a subtle tool of communication. Though the famed language of the fan might be part myth, court records indicate women used gestures, placement, and ornamentation to send nonverbal messages. Sometimes warnings, sometimes wishes. You move on the fan now, folded in your palm, pulsing with unspoken things. Down a curved staircase, you reach the upper terrace. A wide open space rarely visited by the harem. Too exposed, too bright. But this morning it's empty, except for one figure. The Valide Sultan. Standing at the edge veil lifted her silver hair like moonlight stitched into fabric. She doesn't turn when you approach. I heard the song last night, she says. Her voice is low steady. You stand beside her. She didn't play it for him, you know, she continues. She played it for us. You say nothing. The fan grows warmer in your hand. She's clever, the Valide says. But she forgot one thing, a pause. She forgot that even a bird who escapes still leaves feathers behind. You glance at her. You let her go. Another pause. No, she says. She left before I could stop her. You wait. I admired her, the Valide admits. More than she'll ever know. But admiration isn't protection. A breeze lifts, tossing the veil from her shoulder. She doesn't fix it. She lets the wind have its moment. She'll live, the Valide says, or she won't. But she'll be herself. You offer her the fan. She accepts it without looking, turning it over in her hands. Her fingers brush the place where the slat is missing. She doesn't ask about it. Of course not. She simply closes it with a gentle snap. "Thank you," she says. You leave her there, gazing out at the Bosphorus, her silhouette framed by sky and sovereignty. A fringe tidbit. There were rumors that the Valid Sultan kept a collection of objects from every concubine who ever earned her attention. Perfume bottles, hairpins, scraps of embroidery, a chipped tea glass. Not trophies, reminders of what was once soft and might be again. As you return down the steps, you see a young girl sweeping the outer corridor. She hums. No tune you know, just something idle simple. But then she stops and looks at you. "Is it true?" she asks. You raise an eyebrow. "About the girl with the oud?" You nod once. "She left." "She left, you say?" The girl smiles, not sadly, softly. "Good," she says. Then she begins to hum again. You walk on. The palace moves around you as it always does, gliding, breathing, whispering behind your back. But now the melody has changed, and the fan remains closed. For now. You descend a spiral staircase that seems to narrow with every turn, the air growing cooler, heavier, touched by dampness and the scent of old stone. You're headed beneath the harem now to a place rarely spoken of above the archival wing. Not the official one with its polished walls and calligraphic flourishes. No, this is where the forgotten fragments live. The floor creaks beneath your slippers as you step into a low-ceilinged chamber, lit only by oil lamps and narrow slats of light filtering down from somewhere above. Dust floats like silk in the beams, drifting slowly as though time here obeys a different rhythm. You don't know what drew you here, but you know you're meant to be here now. Shelves line the walls, rough-hewn wood filled with scrolls, half-bound ledgers, folded silks. Nothing labeled. Everything categorized only by memory. And seated at the far end of the room at a desk too low and a chair too hard is an old man. One of the palace scribes. He's not startled to see you. He simply looks up, lifts a hand in quiet greeting, and returns to his task copying faded ink onto fresh parchment. You approach slowly, eyes drawn to the sheet before him. It's a list, but not of names, not of events. It's a list of scents. Rose oil, cinnamon, burnt silk, charcoal, jasmine. Your eyes stop there. The word has been circled. Twice. You point. He nods. The girl, you ask. He nods again. She was here, he rasps. For a while, before she ever played a note. You sit beside him. Did she write anything? He gives a tired smile. She wrote everything. He reaches beneath the desk and pulls out a cloth-wrapped bundle. Unfolding it reveals thin sheets of parchment, each one covered in tiny slanted handwriting. Margins filled with musical notation. Doodles. Quotes in Persian, Turkish, Arabic. One phrase repeated often like a refrain. If I disappear, remember the spaces I left. You pick up a page. Its torn edges singed by a candle. At the bottom she's written, "We were not here to be remembered, but to remind." You exhale. Slowly. A mainstream fact. Some concubines were trained in calligraphy not just for art, but to serve as record keepers or correspondents for higher-ranking women. Their writings were often uncredited, their thoughts unsigned. But traces of them survive in margins and footnotes in the inked breath of someone never meant to speak. The scribe leans back in his chair. She left before the Valid could archive her. You ask, "So why keep these?" He shrugs, "Because not all memory needs permission." You gather the pages carefully, your fingers trembling. There's power in holding the weight of someone who chose to leave rather than be written by someone else. The scribe watches you, then says, "There's something else." He opens a small drawer, takes out a ring. Plain, bronze. etched with a single jasmine flower barely visible. She traded this for ink, he says. Said if she ever returned, she'd want it back. You take the ring. It's warm somehow, like it never cooled after leaving her hand. You hold it tightly. You thank him. He nods once, then returns to his list of scents as though it's the most natural inventory in the world. And maybe it is. A fringe tidbit. In Ottoman ghost stories, yes, they existed. It was said that the spirits of women who left unfinished songs behind would haunt scribes, forcing them to write their verses again and again until the melody was whole. Some scribes kept songbooks wrapped in silk to quiet the echoes. You rise and leave the chamber, slowly passing shelves of stories, too tired to ask for attention. Outside, the light has shifted. Afternoon now. The harem stirs again, but differently. Lighter, or maybe looser? A servant passes you humming, not her melody, yours. Something new born from the old. You smile. The jasmine ring still warm in your hand. And for the first time since she vanished, it doesn't feel like a loss, it feels like a seed. You step out into the colonnaded courtyard, the scroll bundle pressed gently to your side, the ring resting in your palm like a secret passed down through generations. The marble is warm beneath your feet. Fountains murmur in corners like half-remembered lullabies. Everything breathes, but nothing rushes. Something has shifted. You sense it in the way the girls speak today, not louder, just less cautiously. In the way the guards look not at but through the women as they pass, as though aware something subtle now eludes their grip. A servant approaches a tray balanced carefully on one hip. She stops beside you, lowers her voice. The Valid requests your presence. You nod. You don't ask why, because by now you know how the harem speaks. The path to her chamber winds through silk-draped hallways and perfume-soaked silence. Two concubines curtsy as you pass. Their eyes flick to the bundle you carry, but say nothing. You arrive at the door painted blue marked with a crescent motif, and the guard taps once before letting you in. She is waiting by the lattice window, not seated, standing. The sun bathes half her face in gold. The other half lingers in shade. It's a fitting symmetry. You step forward, she doesn't turn. You found it, she asks. You hold up the pages. She nods as if confirming something she already knew. She left it for someone, she murmurs. I wondered if it would be you. You offer her the ring next. She studies it for a long while. Then gently she sets it on the sill. I won't keep it, she says. It belongs to movement, not to power. You place the pages down on a small low table beside a copper incense burner that releases slow curls of sandalwood into the air. She didn't ask for legacy, you say quietly. No, the Valide agrees, but she earned it anyway. A mainstream fact. In the final centuries of the Ottoman Empire, some Valide sultans became protectors of culture, curators of poetry, patrons of female scribes, quiet champions of forgotten stories. They preserved fragments others dismissed as trivial, reshaping memory with subtlety, not spectacle. She finally turns toward you. I will not erase her, she says. But I cannot speak her name aloud either. Not yet. You nod, but someone else will. She smiles small but real. Someone always does. The fan you gave her yesterday rests on a shelf behind her. Closed, untouched, still dignified in its silence. You should leave it open, you offer gently. Why? Because it's not hiding anymore, she thinks. Then slowly opens the fan, places it on the sill beside the ring. Outside pigeons flutter up from the garden trees in a sudden whirl of white feathers. She changed something, you say. She changed everything, the valide replies. A fringe tidbit. There's an old Ottoman superstition, one rarely written down, that if a woman left behind three things at once, a scent, a song, and a silence, she'd never be forgotten. Her story would find its way into someone else's mouth. Usually when least expected. Usually when most needed. You look down at the papers, their ink still fresh. The scent of jasmine somehow clings to the parchment. She wrote more than she played you whisper, and she listened more than she spoke the valide finishes. You share one last glance, mutual respect, shaded by melancholy. Then you turn to leave. But before you reach the door, she speaks again. When you tell her story, she says, "Don't begin with how she vanished." You pause. Begin with how she chose. You nod once, and step back into the corridor, the shadows now gentler, the hush now filled with something soft and new. The song is still with you. The ring, the pages, the veiled glances, the field of jasmine. None of them were grand gestures, but none of them were quiet either. And as you pass a group of young girls preparing rose water, one of them looks up and says, "Will you tell us a story?" You smile and say yes, but not the kind you've heard before. Because this one begins behind a veil and ends with a girl walking away. The story begins again as all stories in the palace do, with footsteps. Your own this time echoing down a marble corridor lined with quiet anticipation. You carry no scroll, no letter, no fan. Just a story stitched into your bones like the jasmine thread she left behind. You arrive in the weaving room. It's brighter now than the last time you visited. Curtains have been drawn back. Sunlight hits the looms, directly casting geometric shadows across the floor. Girls work quietly, the rhythmic clack of the shuttle a language of its own. They glance at you, but not with suspicion. With readiness. You move toward the nearest loom and sit. The threads are already set. Gold and cream with a single stripe of deep green running through. You begin weaving. You don't know what it will become yet, only that it must begin. Beside you, another girl starts humming. Not her song, yours. It's begun to spread like ivy. Quiet but relentless. One note curling into the next, climbing through the silences. The melody no longer belongs to one girl. It's become a shared possession like breath or sun or memory. A mainstream fact. In the later Ottoman period, textiles woven within the palace were sometimes gifted to foreign dignitaries. Embroidered panels, tapestries, even entire garments, all designed by hand. Hidden messages were rumored to be woven into some of them, especially those sent from the harem. A flower here, a misaligned border there. You glance at your own weaving and smile. There's a single jasmine stitched right into the border. You keep going. Across the room, the rival no longer so much a rival has joined another loom. Her stitches are slower today, more thoughtful. She's not watching the favorite, not competing. She's remembering. You rise quietly and make your way to the garden once more. The pomegranate tree has begun to bloom again. Tiny blossoms cling to the branches like whispered apologies. You kneel and pick one up that's fallen still fresh. Just as you do, a voice speaks behind you. She would have loved this morning. You turn. It's the girl who once embroidered fields of jasmine. She's grown somehow just overnight. Stronger. Quieter. Still. You nod. She didn't leave a void. She left a path. She smiles. We're following it. You both walk the garden path, stepping over old stones and new petals. The breeze catches your hair. A silk veil twists in the air above a drying rack and dances towards you. You reach up and catch it mid-flight. fold it, and press it to your chest. A fringe tidbit. There was a belief whispered only among the older concubines that a veil caught in the wind was a blessing sent from a woman who'd passed through the palace walls. If it touched your skin before falling, her memory would protect you for a year. You tied the veil to your waist like a sash. Just for today. The jasmine girl picks a bloom from the tree and offers it to you. Not as a token. Not as a symbol. Just a gift. One that says, I see you. I remember her. And I'm still here. You accept it. Because the stories passed between women don't always need to be rewritten. Sometimes they just need to be reheld. As you walk away, you spot something new carved into the side of a low marble bench. At first it looks like a crack. Then you realize it's a name. Etched faintly in a script you know too well. Her name. Not in gold, not in ceremony. But there. Still there. Historians still argue whether the women of the Ottoman Harem lived lives of luxury or imprisonment, poetry or silence. They disagree on the influence they wielded, the dreams they carried, the truths they buried. But those who truly listen, they know some legacies don't need validation, only repetition, and you will carry hers. One stitch, one word, one soft note at a time. The day stretches on quiet as silk being unwound from a spool. You've begun to understand the harem, not as a place but a rhythm, a loop of gestures, glances, silences, and stories passed like heirlooms, from lip to lip, loom to loom, girl to girl. This afternoon you find yourself summoned again, but not to the valide, this time to the bathhouse. You hesitate, not out of fear, but because the bathhouse, the hammam, is sacred space. For the body, yes, but more for the spirit. Steam and secrets mix there. No veils, no embroidery, only water and honesty. The attendant leads you inside. You step past the marble doors into a womb of heat and flickering torchlight. Steam curls along the domed ceiling like incense made of time. A young girl greets you with towels. You nod. She smiles. You disrobe and enter the main chamber, its center dominated by a raised platform of warm marble. Women lounge like cats, their skin glistening, their voices hushed. Someone hums, and there it is again, her melody, but slowed, softened, almost indistinct. A lullaby being passed through steam. You lie down on the platform, warmth soaking through your spine. A masseuse begins to scrub your back with olive soap and a silk mitt. Her movements are firm, but never harsh. Like she knows what you've been carrying, you let go. And the story unspools with the steam. A mainstream fact. The hammam was a cornerstone of Ottoman culture, part hygiene, part ritual, part social theater. Within the harem, it was one of the few places where hierarchy softened. In steam titles melted, scents blended, eyes closed. It was in many ways where women remembered themselves. A woman to your right begins to sing now quietly. Not the full song, just fragments. Then another joins, and another. No one declares it. But soon the bath is full of layered melody, each voice slightly different. Like embroidery, but made of sound. No conductor, no script, only remembrance. You close your eyes. You imagine her just once in this room, feet bare on marble laughter, like water droplets on heated stone. Maybe she hummed here once. Maybe she cried. Maybe she whispered the first bars of the melody into a friend's ear wrapped in towels and dreams. A fringe tidbit. Some believe the domes of the hammam captured sound in their curves, holding fragments of every song ever sung beneath them. Older bathhouses were said to echo the laughter of women long gone. Not haunted, just acoustically faithful. Someone pours warm water down your back. It feels like forgiveness, and perhaps it is. When you finally rise body loose and skin glowing, the women make way for you not with deference but welcome. They've accepted something you haven't quite named yet, but it's settling into you, deep in your bones. You dress slowly, and as you leave, you glance back at the steam curling under the dome. For a moment, you think you see her face. Not a ghost, not memory, just presence. Then it vanishes. You step out into the sunlight. The air outside is sharp and fresh. You take a deep breath, and for the first time in a long while, you feel fully. Historians still argue whether the bathhouse was a space of camaraderie or coercion, whether it liberated women from courtly performance or merely relocated the performance to a stage of steam and stone. But today you know what it truly was, a place where the story could be told with skin and listened to without veils. Evening pours itself across the palace in shades of amber and blue as if the sky has been steeped in saffron and indigo. The call to prayer unfurls from a distant minaret, curling through the air like a silk ribbon carried by wind. Everything slows, everything softens, and yet you feel more awake than you have all day. Tonight is different, not because something is about to happen, but because something already has. You walk the perimeter of the garden now, where the shadows of date palms stretch long and languid over gravel paths. Every leaf seems to sigh, the fountains murmur. Jasmine clings to the breeze, the same scent she carried with her like armor, delicate but persistent. Your steps lead you without intention back to the old musicians' hall. It hasn't been used in weeks, or so you thought. But tonight the door is open, a single lamp glows inside. You pause, then enter. And there, as though summoned by the very memory of longing, sits the Oud. Again, not hers, but an Oud. Resting on a velvet cushion in the center of the room. Waiting. You hesitate at the threshold. Your fingers twitch. And then you sit. Not because you're a musician, because you're a listener. Because sometimes stories require not just telling, but answering. You pick up the instrument. It's lighter than you imagined. The wood is smooth and worn. The strings hum under your fingers as if stretching awake after a long sleep. You strum once. The sound floats into the rafters. Gentle. Imperfect. True. A mainstream fact. The Oud, the grandfather of the lute and ancestor of the modern guitar, held deep symbolic meaning in the Ottoman Empire. More than an instrument, it was considered a vessel for emotion, a storyteller in wood and string. Sultans had personal Oud players. Concubines were trained to charm and calm through its melodies. You play, not a song, a memory. Your fingers fumble. The notes come out crooked. You laugh softly and try again. This time the melody resembles hers. But not entirely. It bends, it twists. It becomes yours. From behind a pillar, a voice speaks. You're braver than I was. You freeze, then turn. The rival girl steps into the light. No longer a rival, maybe never truly one. She carries her embroidery hoop with her, but tonight it hangs loose at her side unfinished. She listens as you play. Then quietly she sings. Not loudly, not perfectly, but just enough. The two of you fill the room with something that doesn't yet have a name. It's not rebellion, it's not mourning, it's continuance. A fringe tidbit. In obscure palace folklore, it was believed that when two women created something together, a melody, a tapestry, a secret language, it would ward off betrayal. As long as both remembered their part, their bond could not be broken. Some called it sistering. Others simply called it survival. She finishes the last note for you. You bow your head in thanks. She nods, then adds, "We should teach it to the younger ones." You say nothing, you just smile, because now you understand. The harem was never meant to be a prison. Not if the stories found a way through. Not if the song remained. Not if each stitch, each note, each breath carried her farther than the walls ever could. You put the oud back on the velvet. The lamp flickers once, then steadies. You both exit the room, not speaking. There's nothing to explain. The melody is no longer a question. It's an inheritance. Night deepens like ink spilled on parchment, soaking into every courtyard corridor and curtain. The palace exhales, not with fatigue, but with fullness. The hush that descends is not silence. It is presence. And you are part of it now. You move through the familiar spaces, the lattice halls, the colonnades, the alcoves embroidered with shadow. But nothing feels familiar anymore, because everything has changed. Or perhaps you have. You pass the old embroidery chamber. Candlelight flickers from within. A few girls still sit in clusters needles, whispering through fabric. But tonight there is no competition. No eyes watching other eyes. Just hands moving. One girl beckons you over. You sit beside her. She shows you a pattern she's working on geometric stars ringed with tiny jasmine buds. You nod in approval. She leans closer. Is it true she made it to Cairo? You raise an eyebrow. Who told you that? She grins. Everyone. A mainstream fact. Escaped concubines, or rather concubines released unofficially, sometimes did resurface in other courts. Cairo, Damascus, even Venice. They re-emerged as wives, tutors, midwives, and occasionally spies. Their pasts were rarely spoken of, but often sensed like sandalwood in still air. You smile. Cairo sounds like a good ending. But is it true? Does it matter, you ask gently? She considers that, then nods. No, not really. You stay a while helping her stitch a border. You've become better at this. Not skilled, but steady. When you rise, she offers you a folded square of muslin. For her, she says, if you ever see her, you tuck it into your sash, not a promise, just a possibility. Outside, the moon hangs low and wide like a bowl of milk suspended over the city. Its light spills unevenly over the garden stones, glinting off the bronze ring still tied to your wrist by a thread of red silk. A fringe tidbit. In palace folklore, if you wore a gifted ring on a thread for 9 days and 9 nights, and then returned it to the earth, your wish would travel with it. But if you kept the ring, the wish stayed with you, a weight, yes, but also a guide. You keep walking. You pass the music chamber where someone now teaches the oud to a new girl. The same room, but retuned, repurposed, reloved. You pass the terrace where 2 former rivals share tea in silence, the fan resting open between them. You pass the laundry courtyard where a veil flutters loose from a line and lands at your feet. You fold it gently. Keep walking. Historians still argue whether women in the harem were isolated or insulated, coerced, or clever footnotes or forces. But they always argue in abstract concepts, categories, systems. Rarely in song, rarely in scent, rarely in stitches, and almost never in choice. But you have lived it now, not as fact, as feeling, as truth curled into fabric and fragrance and the faintest hum beneath a girl's breath. You reach your chamber, open the door, and find something waiting on your cushion, a jasmine blossom. Fresh. No note, no claim, but unmistakable. She passed this way, or someone who knew her did. You sit beside it and breathe. You don't need to ask anymore because her story isn't over. It's everywhere. The blossom lies beside you through the night, small, perfect, fragrant. Its petals are already softening at the edges as if it knows its work is almost done. You lie on your side, the room half lit by moonlight sneaking past the carved shutters. Sleep doesn't come yet. Not because you're restless, but because the stillness is too full. You rise again quietly and step out into the corridor barefoot. The stone is cool beneath your soles. The halls are mostly empty now, except for a servant or two, extinguishing lamps whispering good nights to the shadows. You carry no light. You don't need one. Tonight your steps take you somewhere you haven't dared go before. The Sultan's corridor. Not the audience hall, not his personal chambers, but the small prayer room at its edge. It's said he only uses it during Ramadan, that no woman has entered in decades. But the door is ajar. You hesitate, then slip inside. And it's not opulent. It's simple. Worn carpets, a wooden stand for the Quran, a tiny brass lamp burning low, casting a crescent of gold onto the far wall. You kneel not from obligation but reverence, for silence, for memory, for everything this palace holds that cannot be catalogued. A mainstream fact. The Ottomans maintained private spaces for meditation and devotion within the palace complex. These were rarely documented in detail and their furnishings were minimal by design. Some sultans insisted no gold be used inside them, calling it a place for the soul, not the throne. You look around, and that's when you see it. Tucked beneath the cushion near the wall. Another page, folded. You reach for it with both hands, fingers trembling like the final string of a song. You open it. It's not hers. Not exactly. It's someone writing to her. Lines written in a firmer hand, the ink darker. A reply. Your melody lingers long past the echo. Your footsteps rewrite the dust. Your silence was never empty. It was a map for those who stayed. You close your eyes and press the page to your chest. Outside the palace breathes. The air has cooled and you feel the slow hush of night rolling in like a soft tide washing over every stone, every petal, every hidden word between lines. You return to your room, place the note beside the jasmine, and you know without any question that she had help. Not many, maybe just one. But it was enough. Because escape is never a solo act. It's always a duet, someone leaving and someone letting go. A fringe tidbit Ottoman legend tells of a nightingale that fell in love with a rose and sang so sweetly that the rose finally opened. In one version of the story, the rose vanished the next day, but the garden never stopped blooming where it had once been. You lie down once more, the veil she left tied gently around your wrist, the page tucked beneath your pillow. And this time when your eyes close, it's not out of weariness. It's out of peace. The kind of peace that comes only after understanding. Only after the veil has lifted. Morning doesn't burst in at tiptoes. The palace wakes not with fanfare, but with the quiet rustle of curtains drawn open, slippers on marble, the faint clink of a tea tray somewhere far away. You rise before the others. Today you feel lighter. Not like someone who's forgotten, but someone who has remembered enough. You fold the page from the prayer room, carefully sliding it into your sash beside the jasmine petal. Now slightly bruised from the night, but still fragrant. The veil still circles your wrist, its red thread frayed, slightly soft against your skin. Your destination this morning is not a chamber or a courtyard, it's the roof. The highest terrace of the palace, a place rarely permitted for harem women unless chaperoned. But no one stops you today. Perhaps no one sees you. Or perhaps they do, and choose not to interrupt. You climb the narrow stone stairway, passing faded tiles, ancient spiderwebs in corners and windows that offer only glimpses of the sea. When you reach the top, the breeze kisses your face like it's been waiting for you. And there it is, the Bosphorus, wide, endless, glittering in early light. And somewhere beyond it, Cairo, Damascus, Istanbul itself. Cities where other women walk their own veils, pulled back their own songs, humming under breath. You sit on the ledge and let your eyes rest on the horizon. She's not here, but her echo is. A mainstream fact. The rooftop terraces of Topkapi Palace offered views that stretched from Europe to Asia, from empire to empire. Few women were ever allowed access, but in rare instances the Valid Sultan granted trusted favorites or guests a moment of breath beneath the open sky. Some used that time to pray, others just looked, others dreamed. You take the muslin square gifted by the embroidery girl and unfold it. It's plain, no flowers, no patterns, just fabric, blank, waiting. You hold it up to the wind. It flutters like a flag, like a sigh, like a surrender to something far bigger than the palace walls. Then you tie it around the edge of the terrace post, a marker, a gentle declaration. She was here. She mattered, and she moved. A fringe tidbit. There are unofficial jasmine trails whispered of among storytellers. Paths marked not on maps, but through scent gesture and fabric left behind. Travelers who follow them say they're not routes through land, but through memory. They don't lead to cities, they lead to understanding. You hear footsteps behind you, you don't turn. You know who it is. She sits beside you, the one who used to rival, then question, then harmonize. Her hair is down today, her eyes softer. She'd like this, she says. You nod. She chose this. A long pause. Then will you leave too? You smile. Maybe. Someday, but not yet. No, you say. Not yet. The wind picks up. The muslin dances. From below the palace resumes its rhythm. Lessons. Chores. Gossip. Music. You both sit in silence for a long while, the kind of silence that doesn't demand to be filled. Then she leans over and hands you something, an oud string. Worn, used, but still strong. From the last one she played, she says. I kept it. You wrap it around your wrist next to the red thread of the veil. Because some bonds don't untie, they intertwine. You look at her and ask, shall we teach them? She nods, and just like that, a new melody begins. And now, as the last of the sun dissolves into a purple hush, and the palace wraps itself once more in its veil of night, you walk one final path. It takes you through everything. Past the musician's chamber where the oud rests in its velvet nest. Past the embroidery room where new designs now mix jasmine with stars. Past the gardens where girls hum, not to charm anyone, but to remember themselves. You pass the old door that led to the archive. It's closed now, but you know what lies behind it. You pass the chamber of the Valide. Her door is open. Inside she writes. Or perhaps just thinks with ink. She glances up and meets your gaze. And you both nod. Because you both know. Not the same things, but enough of them. You descend into the garden one last time, barefoot, quiet. Tonight they are lighting lanterns, not for ceremony. Just because. You pause by a reflecting pool where petals float and stars tremble on the surface. You sit and watch and listen. The melody finds you again. This time played not by her hands or your hands, but by the wind brushing the leaves, the rustling veils drying on the line, the laughter drifting from a high balcony. You realize then she's not gone. She's been scattered, intentionally, like seeds, a mainstream fact. In some interpretations of Ottoman mysticism, the highest form of love was not possession, but dispersion. To love something so completely that you wished it free. To let it be remembered not in statues or tombs, but in echoes. You look up at the moon and laugh softly. It is full tonight, round, bright, watching. You remember the fan still resting open, the embroidery unfinished, the song half sung, the stories untied. And you smile, because that's how it should be. Not a closed book, but a turning page. A fringe tidbit. There was once an Ottoman superstition that if you said a woman's name aloud under a full moon and then whispered her melody into water, she would visit you in a dream not as a ghost but as a guide, and only if you asked nothing of her. You stand, you whisper her name, you hum the melody, and the wind carries it across the pool. You wait, but not for an answer, just for a moment. Then you turn and walk back toward the palace. You pass another girl on the path. She doesn't speak. She just hums. Same melody, softer, braver. You don't stop her. You don't need to, because the veil was never meant to conceal, it was meant to carry. And tonight it does. And now the night deepens even further. The last voices in the palace fall silent. The breeze eases. The jasmine closes its petals, and the moon begins its slow drift downward, pulling the stars along behind it like silk threads through dark velvet. You're no longer walking now, you're resting. The story has not ended, but it no longer needs to move. Just to breathe, like the soft rise and fall of your own chest. Inhale, the scent of rosewater and old parchment. Exhale, the memory of song not loud but lingering. Somewhere oud strings are gently being tuned by hands you'll never see. Some words are still being whispered behind tapestries. Some stitches remain unfinished but on purpose, because not all things beautiful are meant to be completed. You are part of it now, not just a listener, not just a witness, but a thread in the tapestry. You've seen the veil lift, not to reveal scandal or secret, but to show intention, the quiet, persistent will of women, to remember to remake, to reach beyond the walls without ever leaving them. So now as your breath slows, let your mind drift with the breeze through the terrace arches. Let the melody find you again and again. And let yourself be carried, as gently as a blossom falls onto still water. You're safe here. You're remembered. And somewhere beneath another sky, a girl hums you back into her story. End of script. Sweet dreams.